Really quick before we kick off this video, I just want to mention this is going to be part one of a part two series. So this is going to be the beginner intro version. We're basically going to teach the prompt system. We're going to teach how to get your project all set up. We're going to go through a basic version of the workflow. And then in part two, we're going to have more of an expert version of this where I'm actually going to show you how to take everything that we learned in part one and actually apply it to a more production grade app. We're going to be building something that looks a lot more complex than the project that you're going to see here, but the project that you're going to see in this particular workshop for part one is going to lay the foundation for everything that we're going to be doing in part two. So just wanted to mention that at the top here. This video is going to be a workshop on how to use my O1 Pro template system to build full stack apps like this Receipt AI project that we're going to be building in this video with OpenAI's O1 Pro model. So this is currently OpenAI's most powerful model that they offer, in my opinion, and I've used this very, very extensively since the start of December when it was released. This is the most powerful model in the world for writing code. I'm going to show you this kind of 6-prompt system that I think is really approachable for anyone. So whether you're a beginner, an experienced developer, I think there's going to be a lot that you can take from this. Again, we're going to be building this Receipt AI project completely from scratch from my template. So what this workflow is really about is kind of taking this open source starter template that I have. This is actually what I use personally to start my new projects from. And I've just kind of open sourced it. And what I've tried to do is figure out how can we build a prompt system that combines my template with all of these different prompts to make building these apps more accessible. So again, this is great for beginners because you don't really need to know any code to get started. This will feel a little bit like going to the gym for your mind. But the great thing about learning today, right, is you have these AI models that sort of act as personal tutors. So anytime you get stuck or have a question, pull up ChatGPT, pull up Claude, pull up Google AI Studio, pull up whatever your preferred AI chat app is, ask it questions, paste in your code, and you're going to be able to be off to the races with this thing. So this workflow is heavily based on this post that I had, I don't know, like 10 days ago or so. Basically, I bought one of my friends a ChatGPT Pro subscription. They did me a favor, so I did them a solid and I got them a subscription. They ended up building like a legitimate app with this that actually has like real customers. And they're not a developer. They don't know how to code. They work in sales. And so my workflow here is an attempt to kind of take all of the things that I've learned from that, take their experience and kind of share with you guys. I think this is a really effective way to build. And even if you don't use this system, kind of step by step how I'm going to teach you, there's just a lot that you can learn about AI code generation in general, about prompting in general. These prompts are really detailed. Like, let's just jump into one of these really quick, just to kind of show you an example, right? Pretty big prompt here. There's a lot going on. There's step-by-step stuff. There's XML in here, kind of template variables, all sorts of stuff. So there's a whole lot to learn about, and everything in this workshop is going to be timestamped. Okay, this is going to be a pretty long video, so I'm going to timestamp every single thing. We're also going to be offering this as in course format on Takeoff. So Takeoff is kind of my platform for teaching AI skills. If you want to join our course form, you can go sign up, go to courses, and then in the workshop section, you're going to see building apps with O1 Pro template system. This obviously will be public for you guys. And then you can kind of go lesson by lesson here, keep track of your progress and all that stuff. This is a request I've gotten a ton. So we obviously have a bunch of different courses on Takeoff. And one of the things people want to know is like, what's an example of your teaching style? What's an example of like some content so I can see if I actually want to join and do all the other stuff. And so this is kind of aiming to answer that as well. So obviously this is going to be kind of our open source version of a real world course that we think is going to be really, really high value for all of you. So if you find this helpful, it does do me a lot. If you can like this, if you can repost this, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe. It really does go a long way in helping me do a lot of kind of my free content and free tutorials and guides and stuff. So if you guys do find this helpful, share it with your friends. And I would love your support so that I can continue doing this. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to actually talking about who this is for, what the goal is going to be of this, how to approach this, and kind of the general workflow. Let's kick things off with a demo of what I'm going to be showing you how to build. So worth noting, you don't actually have to build out the same idea. If you just want to follow along with the workflow and kind of work on your own idea, that's totally cool too. But this Receipt AI app is basically an app. You know what, let's actually just demo it really quick. So let's go jump into the dashboard here. You'll see I have a few receipts that were uploaded and verified. What's going to happen is I could actually click this upload receipts button. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag my latest Claude subscription receipt in here, and I'm going to click the upload button, and this is going to do a bunch of things to the back end. So you can see my receipt's uploading. We should in just a second a success message. This is actually calling GPT-4o to extract some data from this. So if I actually go to this verify page, you'll see we got an image uploaded with our receipt, and you'll see how all of this data is filled in here for kind of these first 4 categories. This was all pulled from GPT-4o. Okay, so this is one of the OpenAI models on their API. This pulled data from that image just using their LLM, correctly filled that out, and that all looks like it was correct data, so I don't really need to update that. We're just going to classify this as software and confirm. Okay, now our receipt's verified, and then if we actually go to the dashboard here, we should see that this was in fact added and our dashboard was updated. Okay, so we're going to be building something that looks pretty simple, pretty familiar to you here. Obviously, depending on the app idea you use here, whether you follow along with what I do or you do your own, you know, your results are going to be different. And so this is going to just try and get you to the point where you have kind of a full stack app that's connected with backend and front end and auth and payments and all that kind of stuff, so that you can kind of start building your own individual ideas. And the entire workflow is going to show you how to do everything, you know, and so you're going to be able to kind of customize the workflow and tweak things to fit how you work, to fit your idea, all that kind of stuff. But this is a quick little example of what we're going to be building. I addressed this a little bit already, but I want to talk a little bit more about who this workflow is going to be for. So again, this is going to be great for beginners because most of you are kind of starting to use these AI tools for the first time, and you're actually able to build software, right? With things like, chatgpt, things like Cursor, all these different tools. For the first time, you're able to kind of pull these ideas out of your head and actually turn them into something that's real. And so the kind of goal of what we want to do for all of you beginners is we want to teach you, let's get you familiar with best prompting practices. This is one of the ways that you can really get much, much better results from these AI models, right? So let's teach you a workflow around that. Let's teach you full stack app development so that you kind of learn all the different pieces from front end to back end and everything in between. So a really nice way for all of you to approach things, because you don't really have to come into this knowing how to write any code. You just need to come into this knowing that, hey, I'm going to get probably stuck a couple times. I'm going to get lost a little bit. I'm just going to ask LLM's question, right? I'm going to pull up my, my AI tutor in whatever app I like to use. I'm going to ask it questions. I'm going to paste my code, and I'm going to try and follow along with this tutorial. And by the end of it, you're going to kind of have a good starting place to go from. This is the best way to learn, in my opinion. You don't really want to learn how to build projects by jumping into some boring course where it's like, hey, here's a for loop, here's an if statement. Like start learning by actually building a project, right? And so that's the entire point of this workflow, right? We want to teach you a project. And for experienced developers out there, especially if you're somebody who hasn't really jumped into AI code generation tools before, in my opinion, this is the time when you really need to start paying attention to this stuff, because in the past you could kind of get away with ignoring this stuff because the models weren't good enough, but the models are now so good and context windows are getting so long that if you're a professional developer and you're not using, you don't have to use my exact workflow here, but if you're not using pieces of these things, if you're not using you're not learning how to prompt models well, if you're not learning how to use AI tools like Cursor or Windsurf, AI first, AI native IDEs, things like that, you're going to be left in the dust, frankly. So it's really kind of the time for you to actually pay attention to this stuff if you're not already. If you are, congrats, that's great. You're somebody like me who's been able to take advantage of this stuff. But especially if you're somebody who is not really getting good results out of code gen and things like that, this is going to help you a lot. So this is going to be great for beginners just because many of you want to build out your ideas for the first time, and we're going to teach you how to do this. And it's great for experienced developers as well, because many of you just aren't up to date with best practices with AI code gen tools and things like that. And so this workflow is really going to kind of give you a lot of different interesting insights that you can kind of pull from and apply to your own jobs, your own workflows, and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk for a sec about course goals. So obviously at the end of this, you should be able to build a full stack app with AI. That's kind of the main takeaway from this workshop, right? There's also a few other things that you're going to be able to walk away with, right? You're going to learn how to build a lot more advanced prompts. Okay. So if you're somebody who's like, man, I just don't feel like I'm really good at prompting, I don't feel like I get great results from these models when I'm trying to write code, we're going to walk you through that. Okay. So you're going to learn how to become a better prompter. You're going to learn some things about using AI tools like Cursor. Okay, so we're going to be using Cursor in this course. If you're not using Cursor, at least be using Windsurf. Windsurf's another great AI code editor. But you'll be able to learn some practical skills about using that kind of tool set. Obviously, you'll learn how to kind of navigate a full stack app, right? So you'll learn things like how to use a database, right? With Supabase, you'll learn things like how to implement payments into your app with something like Stripe. Okay, so you're going to be able to take all of these different skills that you learn here, walk away, and hopefully be able to actually build out your ideas. There are many people who are just going to want to kind of build personal projects and hobby projects, and I think that's great. I think one of the underrated things about AI software, right, is that you can kind of, take this GitHub repo, right? You're going to be able to start to build these things out for yourself, right? So if you have these little silly tools or just fun stuff you want to do, just to create, right? Just to build, just to have fun, you'll be able to do that. If you're actually somebody who wants to like go start a startup or start a business, you have this idea, you're actually going to be able to take all of the actionable insights and workflows from this, and you're going to actually kind of be able to go pursue that type of goal. So all sorts of skills you're going to pick up here, and we just want to be able to equip you to be able to build with AI. So we will, of course, be diving into all the different steps here in the upcoming lessons, in the upcoming sections. One of the things that I want to do to kind of kick off the end of this overview section is I just want to talk about the workflow at a really high level. Okay, so the way this is going to work here, if I actually go back to the prompts here, we're going to be using this 6-prompt system. It's really like 5, where 2 of them you can kind of pick between. So the way this is going to work is we're going to start off by cloning my app template. This is a starting app template. This is kind of all of the code, all of the what we might refer to as glue code. That's going to save you a bunch of time. You don't want to have to go through things like, like if I jump into the app folder here. One of the things you'll notice, we have an API with Stripe all set up for you so that you don't have to go write that Stripe code if you want to implement subscriptions in your app. We have that code for you, and all you need to do is go make your Stripe account, get your API keys, add those, and boom, you're going to have subscriptions ready to roll, right? So this is the advantage of an app template, is it just gives you a really good starting template that saves you a ton of kind of the annoying little startup work when you normally kind of start these new projects. And one of the other nice things about using a starting template that's kind of high quality is when you feed the starting template to the AI model and you ask for the code back, what's going to happen is you're injecting all of this context into an app that already has structure. So what's going to happen is the AI is going to almost act like a developer that you have on your team. Okay, that's one of the things that I want you to kind of use as sort of an anchor, is you want to start viewing O1 Pro throughout the rest of this course, throughout the rest of this workshop, as sort of a developer on your team instead of just a normal AI model. O1 Pro is really kind of the first model that almost feels like an actual developer doing a task. And so what's going to happen is we're going to give it kind of these steps, as you'll see once we get into some of the planning workflow and the planning prompt part of this workshop. And what you'll see is kind of as we feed the AI model each step with the code that we have in our template here, it's going to kind of just be able to add on to it. And you'll see how that workflow becomes really slick. But what's going to basically happen is we're going to start with a little bit of a request prompt. So we're going to iterate with an AI model to come up with the request that we're going to feed into the rest of our other prompts. Once we have the request prompt done, what's going to happen is we're going to then use the request to generate a technical specification. So this is going to really influence how the AI goes about building your app. When you kind of have it generate a tech spec with a very kind of sophisticated output here, and you can see an example of this prompt. We'll of course talk about each one of these prompts in detail. We're just going to stay high level for now. But what happens is you're going to get that tech spec, and then you're going to be able to feed the spec in your request into a planner prompt. Okay, so this is kind of like step 3 of the workflow. Once you have the planner prompt, the AI model is going to act as a task planner. It's going to break each one of these things down step by step into probably, depending on what your idea is, depending on how much you iterate on this, probably somewhere a dozen steps is probably what the step count's going to look like for what we're going to be building here. And once you have the step generated from the planner prompt, then you can use one of these 2 code gen examples. So we're going to be sticking with the vanilla one for this course. I'll talk about the XML version when we get to that section. But this is where the AI model, this is where O1 Pro is going to act as your developer, kind of like your personal little hire here for $200 a month, right? O1 Pro, obviously a little bit expensive. I'll make note on some other models you might be able to use. when we get there. But you're going to be able to feed this code gen prompt with your project request, with your project rules, which I've gone ahead and written for you as part of the template, right? This is another thing that's so great about templates. You're going to feed the tech spec, you're going to feed the implementation plan, and then you're going to feed your existing code, right? Which kind of came from, again, from that template that you started with, which we'll show you how to do. And what's going to happen is you're going to go step by step feeding this code gen prompt in with all of the other information, and it's going to be able to build out your app. And it's going to be super cool. And kind of at the end of it on the other side, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to do this last review step. This one's kind of optional, just to kind of clean up some loose ends. And this is really going to get you started, and you're going to kind of walk away with an actual full stack app, which is going to be really cool. So that's kind of the workflow at a really high level. Again, I know that probably felt really fast. Just remember, we're going to be covering each one of these prompts in detail coming up. So don't worry like, oh no, I'm like already feeling lost. We're just going over kind of what the steps look like, right? It's just sort of this like 6-step system where the code gen prompt in particular is kind of a step where you loop a bunch of different times depending on how many steps you get. But this is what the workflow looks like, and this is where we're going to teach you. We're going to teach you how to plug in all of these different technologies, all these different pieces of the stack in, so that you can get this AI model working for you to produce your app. The way that this workflow is going to be kind of broken down into sections is we basically just had the overview section. We're now moving on to the tools section, in case we're going to go over all of the various tools, kind of the core tools that we're going to be using for the workflow. We're going to then move on to the prompt section. Okay, so then we're going to cover all of the 6 different prompts that we're going to be using in this workflow. Once we have covered tools and prompts, we're going to go to project setup section. This is where we're going to cover kind of all the things that you need to do to set up accounts and things like that. The great news is all of the accounts that you're going to be using, with the exception of O1 Pro, are going to be free, in case you're not going to have to, fork over your credit card to a bunch of different companies. These are all free. Then we're going to build the app, and then we're going to talk about just kind of a nice little wrap up section. So first tool that we're going to be talking about is the actual starter template that we're going to be using. So the way that this entire course is going to work is we're going to have all of the links for you guys. So one of the advantages of using Takeoff, right, is you're going to have each one of these lessons. You can click in, you can watch the video, and below each video we have text sections with links and stuff. So this keeps things really well organized. Obviously, a lot of you are going to be viewing the kind of open source version on X and on YouTube. So we'll make sure for all of you guys to have all of the links on X. We'll have it below the original post, and in YouTube, we'll have it in the description. Okay, we want to make sure that all of those links are as accessible as possible for all of you watching on those 2 platforms. But the first link that you're going to want to pay attention to is the actual GitHub repository for this project. So this is a repo that is based off of my original app template. So I want to kind of note at the top here some of the differences between these two. So if you're following along with this particular workflow video with the tutorial that I'm going to be doing here, I recommend you're going to want to clone from this repo, and we'll show you step by step how to do this in upcoming lessons. I just want to talk about it for a sec. If you are feeling a little bit more comfortable, my McKay's app template, so this is kind of my main app template, I'm going to continue to update this one over time, and this has a few extra bells and whistles, things like testing and analytics and things like that. So if you're feeling a little bit more advanced and over time you want to keep up to date, you want to start new projects, then you may want to use kind of the actual app template that I keep up to date. You can see my latest update for this was 2 days ago, right? So I do keep this thing up to date. The one in this particular project, I'm just kind of freezing in time, because what can happen is I don't want to, in 6 months, somebody watches this and the app template I use for my typical template is way out of date and different than the one we kind of used here. So I'm just kind of freezing this here. This is probably the one you're going to want to use for this video. It's a little bit scoped down to get rid of some of the complexity around things like, again, like testing and analytics are cut out of this, just to keep things simple and keep kind of the main thing, you know what I mean? So worth noting that in this repository, we have a pretty extensive README with a bunch of different links. So again, if you're one of those people that are on X and on YouTube and you're watching this, the README is going to be another great place where you can grab a bunch of links that you might be missing out on if you're not doing it in the Takeoff course form, which is totally great. So we've tried to really make this pretty extensive for you guys to know how to clone the starter template, know what environment variables, know what accounts you need, all that kind of stuff. So again, I kind of talked about this a few minutes ago, but the main perk of using a starter template is you just give the AI a ton of code that it can work with to start, right? So you're not starting from scratch. You're not having to do all these like schleppy tasks where it's like, oh, I got to go do all like the database setup, and I got to go, I got to get my front end set up, and I got to go download my starter components from ShadCN or whatever UI library you like. This just kind of covers it all out of the box, and it's just going to save you a bunch of time. So just make sure that you are able to find this GitHub repository, because this is kind of the central source of truth for every single thing that we're going to be doing going forward. The elephant in the room obviously is going to be O1 Pro. So let's talk about O1 Pro for a second, because this is going to be a very expensive model to use. To use O1 Pro, you actually have to subscribe right now to ChatGPT's Pro subscription tier, which is $200 a month, which obviously is going to be very expensive, in particular for people that are like hobbyists, for people that are students, which, want to take off. We have a lot of student users, things like that. So let me just talk a little bit about O1 Pro, and then I'll talk for a second about possible alternative models that you can use, because we want to make this as accessible as possible. But I will, and I make note of this in the README here. You'll see that I say, while I highly recommend O1 Pro for this workflow, you can also use models like O3 Mini, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Gemini 2.0 Pro, DeepSeek R1. The problem is you're going to run into issues with this particular workflow, which is why I recommend using O1 Pro. It's the best model on the market right now. Worth noting, I'm not sponsored by OpenAI or any of the companies in this video. Just want to be really clear about that. If I ever do any sponsorships, which I have literally never done, I'll be very upfront and honest with you guys about that. Obviously, my existing following kind of knows my vibe about that, but I imagine a lot of new people are going to watch this. So just want to reiterate, like, a lot of people are, their eyebrows are going to go up a little, and they're going to give me an inquisitive look, because it's going to seem probably like it's sponsored. It's not. It's just this is the model that I use the most right now, in conjunction with Claude 3.5 Sonnet that powers my cursor usage. This is kind of where I'm finding the most value. So if you're a professional, highly worth it. $200 a month is basically like a coworker. It's not only do you get the code generation stuff, but you get things like deep research too, which is a new feature. But obviously the focus of this is going to be O1 Pro's code generation abilities. That's kind of the entire name of the game here. So a few things that you get with O1 Pro, and it's kind of the reason why it powers this workflow. It's just, if you think about model power and almost kind of model IQ, O1 Pro is just the most powerful model that you can publicly access right now. So if you're trying to do things like complex code generation, it's just going to be the perfect model for the job. It's the smartest one we have. It blows everything out of the water. If you have not tried this model, you are really missing out. And I cannot say that strongly enough. So a few kind of more practical things, right? Because one of the things you're like, okay, you say it's a smarter model, but I have other models that I think are pretty smart. I'm telling you it's a smarter model, but here are some of the other things that you're going to run into if you try and use other models with this workflow. So O1 Pro has a extremely long context window, and it's not just that the context window is long. The context window utilization is really high. So for example, like Google's models like Gemini 2.0 Pro, right? This is a model that has like a million token context type stuff. So you might go, well, Gemini has like way longer context. Why wouldn't I use that? The problem is that it runs into kind of some of the same issues that these other models run into, which is once you get beyond like 200,000 tokens, the context window utilization, just meaning its ability to pull context from like any of those million tokens or whatever, starts to go down pretty quickly. And O1 Pro just has really good context window utilization, which means that if you're feeding it like 100K tokens of code at once, which is the kind of thing that we're going to be doing in this workflow, what's going to happen is O1 Pro can see, some really obscure file that's at like the 40,000 token mark, and then some other obscure file that's at like the 75K token mark, and it's actually going to be able to pull from those and write code appropriately. And I just have not seen this consistently from other models. So this is one of those big things that really makes this workflow work, because in order to just dump a bunch of code into a model and have it actually write everything it needs to write, it really needs to be able to use every single thing that you give it in its context. And O1 Pro excels at that. The other thing that's really important is that O1 Pro's output tokens, A, are very coherent, and B, can go for very long. So this thing can like reliably output like 20,000 tokens of code, right? So if you're literally doing some sort of step in this workflow where like, 13 different files are getting edited, what's going to happen is it's actually going to be able to output all 13 of those files, and it's going to do it accurately. And a lot of these other models might be able to do it for, a handful of files, but once you get beyond kind of that double digit point, they're really going to struggle. And O1 Pro just is able to kind of nail this. So again, I mentioned this earlier, but you really want to think of O1 Pro like it's not just an AI model, but it's almost like this AI coworker that you're working with. It's like a developer on your team. And that's kind of how we're going to be trading this thing. So obviously, you're going to have to experiment with this workflow on your own to really trust my own takes. I'm telling you, I work on AI code generation stuff more than, like, honestly, probably more than most people in the world. This is literally what I spend like all day, every day doing. So I have a really good intuitive feel for this stuff. And, you're either going to have to take my word for it and try it out. And then you're going to kind of be like, oh yeah, O1 Pro is awesome. Or you're going to miss out. So recommend trying this model out if you want to use other models. Obviously, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is an incredible model for code, right? This is accessible via Claude's, $20 a month subscription or whatever, right? That's a great model to use. You can, of course, use ChatGPT O3 Mini. O3 Mini High in particular is a great model to use. I mentioned Gemini 2.0 Pro, another great model. And then there's, of course, like DeepSeek R1, if you're somebody who's a little bit more inclined to be into kind of the open source models and things like that. R1 is another model. You will, like I mentioned, you're going to run into some issues because there's going to be things like limited context length. There's going to be things like the model's not outputting code enough. It's not being coherent enough, right? Maybe it missed a couple files that it should have gotten. So for those of you who are using those models, you may have to tweak this workflow to make it work with those. But it's probably better to at least try it with the other ones and work around it than not doing it at all. So that's kind of my notes on models. Again, highly recommend using O1 Pro. There's a reason this is called the O1 Pro template system, because this is the model that this workflow is built for. So I know that was kind of a long rant on models and things like that. But in order to understand the power of this workflow, you really have to understand that this model in particular is kind of a necessity for that. And of course, hopefully over the coming months, we get this model at a cheaper rate. We get other models that are just as powerful, that are cheaper, whether it be from OpenAI or one of these other labs. The great thing about these LLMs is the cost does come down over time. So if you're seeing this on day one, maybe you can't afford it, but in probably a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, there's probably going to be something on the market that's equivalent at a lower price. Maybe even from, maybe even the subscription drops here. I have no idea what can happen, but just keeping your eye on, we're going to get better models throughout 2025. So it's going to be exciting to continue to try this prompt system with some of the new models that we're going to get over the course of this year. The next tool that we're going to be talking about is a tool called Repo Prompt. So you can find this at repoprompt.com. This is a free app that you're going to be able to use to help manage your context. So one note, and this is something that I hope gets resolved sooner than later. You'll notice that this is a macOS native app. So Windows and Linux users, we're going to see if we can try and find something that can act as an alternative for you guys. So if you're watching this video, particularly if you are on X or on YouTube, if you know of any tool that is similar to Repo Prompt for Windows and Linux users, please jump in the comments. And if you guys can upvote and like whatever comment people find for an alternative here, that would be super helpful. We obviously really want to make sure that Windows and Linux users can have an easy time with this workflow. The way that we're going to be using Repo Prompt for this workflow is it's going to help us manage our context. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is, because we're going to be feeding such giant chunks of our code base over and over and over, we're going to be kind of having to manage, okay, what folders are we going to include? What files are we going to include? All that kind of stuff. Repo Prompt is built to help us with that problem. So macOS users, Repo Prompt, make sure you get it. It's going to be one of the most helpful tools that you use. Hopefully Windows and Linux users can use it soon on the official app here, but hopefully we can find the community members that can help us find alternatives for you guys. Bonus is, if anybody can't find one, this would be a really awesome open source project. So if you're trying to make a splash, maybe you're kind of an indie hacker, indie developer, you're somebody who wants to like build an audience or you want to go viral or something, you should build this for Windows or Linux. This is like one of the most high value things that you can do for that community. So bonus challenge, really a bonus challenge on the bonus challenge would be trying to use the workflow that we use in this workshop to actually build this. But this is going to be a repo prompt, and we'll obviously cover how to use this in some of the lessons that are coming up. Lastly, on the tool side of things, we're going to be using Cursor throughout this course. So the primary way we're going to be interfacing with AI code gen tools is via O1 Pro, via ChatGPT. We won't be using Cursor a ton, but it is worth noting that the code editor that we're going to be using in the rest of this workflow video is going to be Cursor. Cursor does have a free 2-week pro trial, so they do have this kind of hobby tier that comes with pretty generous amount of completions here. You can see 2,000 completions, so that's pretty good. So if you have never tried out Cursor, definitely recommend it. This is one of those things that I always recommend, especially for beginners, because it's going to give you all these powerful tools that you can use, things like chat, things like Composer inside of your IDE directly. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. And obviously, given the fact that they have a free plan here, it's basically impossible to say no to it. Obviously, Cursor is one of the most popular AI tools in the entire world now. So I'm probably telling most of you something that you already know. Also worth noting, we do have a course on Takeoff that we just literally this week refreshed, our Cursor course 2.0. So if you're like, oh, Cursor is like incredible, I want to get more out of it, this is like a 3-hour thing that you can go through if you're already on Takeoff anyways. And you can get totally up to speed on all the different stuff there. So we're also going to be doing in a few days a workshop on Cursor Agent. So Cursor just shipped a ton of new agentic AI coding features right within their app, which are pretty sweet. So we're going to do another kind of one of these workshop style videos on that. So definitely make sure to look out for that. 2 more AI tools that I just want to recommend really quickly are Perplexity. Perplexity is another one of those really popular AI tools that many of you are familiar with, many of you already love and use. The reason that Perplexity is so awesome is because anytime that you need up-to-date documentation on things like software libraries and stuff, what you can do is you can ask Perplexity, get up-to-date information for the web. And so if you're like, oh, I don't know how to use the OpenAI docs on this thing, well, Perplexity can go search that, figure it out for you, and get you an answer really quickly. It's a super nice tool to have in your toolbox. They have a pretty generous free tier as well. And then another really great tier or tool that you want to use is V0. So if you're somebody who likes to iterate on UI a bunch, V0 could be super valuable for you. We'll not get super into depth here, but definitely worth checking out V0's free plan and seeing if you like that. That can help a lot of people, especially beginners who have never really built UI. They do a lot of really awesome things with V0. So Cursor, Perplexity, and V0 kind of round out the last of the tools that we're going to be talking about. So now let's actually talk about all of the prompts. Let's actually talk about the prompt template system. This is when we're going to start to slow down just a little bit. Okay, we've been kind of cruising. We've been talking a lot about, recommended tools and overview stuff. This is where we're getting into the real meat of the workshop here, right? This is where we're going to start talking about each one of our 6 prompts. So this is a very, very carefully crafted prompt system that is going to maximize what you can actually get out of O1 Pro. So the way that these prompts are going to work is that they're kind of going to sequentially feed from one prompt to the next and to the next, and each one of these kind of builds on top of each other in order to kind of build a really comprehensive system from which O1 Pro can work from. So let's kick things off with the request prompt here. The request prompt is kind of, this is where you work in collaboration with an AI model to actually come up with your idea. So one of the things that I recommend you do is we're going to kind of go prompt by prompt here. I recommend pausing the video at the very start of kind of the reading of each one of these, or at the very beginning of my analysis of each one of these prompts. Read through it yourself just so that you kind of have a general idea of what's going on. And then I'm going to kind of walk you through the analysis of it. So take a second here to pause this and read through this prompt. Awesome. So what we're going to do here, we're going to kind of look at what's going on. So you can see at the very start here, I say I have a web app idea I'd like to develop. Here's my initial concept, and see how idea is in all caps between these 2 curly brackets here. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be actually putting our request in here. So we will get to doing this. We're going to do all of this in step 1 of the app section. So this is we're going to obviously cover all the prompts here, and then we're going to cover all of the kind of setup steps that you'll need from all the different services. and then we'll actually get to building the app. So we'll actually use these prompts in that section. But the idea here is you're basically going to copy this prompt, paste it into O1 Pro. You're going to put your idea here. And then this is the only prompt really that's going to be collaborative. This is going to be kind of a turn-based prompt. So you can see we're even prompting the model to know that these exchanges are going to be kind of turn-based. We're basically saying, hey, after each of these exchanges, return this format. And so this is something called, output format specifications. This is basically telling the AI model in your prompt what output you want it to give you. So this is a technique that we're going to be using all the time. We're going to be kind of forcing it to give us structured output. I probably shouldn't use the term structured output because that actually sort of means something else in the context of working with AI models. But you can see here, we're basically asking the AI model to return us project name, project description. We're going to be working with it on the target audience. We want to define our desired features. Okay, so this is where we're going to kind of tell the AI exactly what we actually want in our app. We're even going to give it some design requests. So one note on the design thing, AI models still aren't that great at design. This is still something they have a ways to go. It's kind of ironic because in a lot of ways this year they're starting to become kind of superhuman at code. Like they're literally like top 0.1% among like competitive programmers. All these models are like O1 Pro is certainly is for sure, but their design is like somewhat basic. But it's still good enough to start, and it's certainly not bad. But you can positively influence the design by specifying kind of the design language you want, things like that. And of course, that's influenced too by your target audience a little bit. But what's going to happen when we actually use this prompt is we're going to say, hey, we're going to continue iterating and refining this request until it's complete and ready. So this is basically going to be something that we engage in with some sort of an AI model. Interesting, this is going to be the one prompt we don't use with O1 Pro, because anytime you're doing something that's extremely turn-based and a little bit more lightweight, you don't really want to use the full power of O1 Pro. It's going to be really slow and just kind of overkill for that task. So we're going to be using GPT-4o within ChatGPT's standards here actually for this, but definitely read through this prompt, study it a little bit. This is going to come again in handy when we get to our step 1 of our app section. So let's actually move to the next prompt. In our workflow, once we have the request prompt generation back from the AI model, we move on to the spec prompt. So the spec prompt is just short for tech spec, right? Technical specification. This is where we're going to be building a little bit more of a robust kind of detailed specification based on our review prompt. So pause this video and read through this prompt really quick. One of the things that you'll notice is we're actually feeding our project request right directly into the spec prompt. So I mentioned that each one of these prompts sort of builds off of each other and uses answers, uses generations from the kind of old prompt that we used, right? This is the first example of that. So what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to take the final request that we get back from the AI model from the request prompt. We're going to inject that as part of our spec prompt. So you'll see we're using these tags here. This is referred to as XML prompting. One of the things that you can do in your inputs that you give to AI models is you can kind of include them into these, like these caret brackets here, into XML tags, and it just kind of helps the model identify pieces of context, particularly if they're large. So you'll notice that's a pattern that we use pretty frequently throughout this O1 Pro system. So one of the things that you'll do here is you'll enter your request here. Again, we're going to go through an actual live example of this upcoming. And what's going to happen is your review prompt, or your request result, rather. So many prompts here. I gotta make sure I'm giving you guys the right information here. So your request result is going to go in here, and the second prompt here is going to use that to generate a spec. So this isn't the only piece of information that this model or that this prompt is going to use to generate the spec. It's also going to take in project rules, and it's also going to take in the starter template itself. So let's talk about the project rules for a second, because this is one of the really key things that you have to learn with this workflow. This is not just useful for this workflow in particular. This is useful for anything that you do that involves AI and code generation. So if we jump back into the GitHub repository for this project, one of the things that you'll see In this repo, as you'll see, if I can find it here, you'll see that there's this .cursor rules file. So one of the things that cursor has, and it's actually kind of getting deprecated in favor of this other cursor rules format. Luckily, we cover both in this repository, so you're going to be set either way. But one of the things that you're going to be able to use with a cursor rules file is you can basically feed this giant text file of rules for your code base to the AI. So you can see this cursor file in particular is 643 lines, and we cover everything. So just to peruse this for a second, one of the things you should probably do here is pause the video again and maybe just kind of peruse through this file, and then we'll come back. So hopefully you actually went through and looked at this. So you can see we're doing all sorts of different things in this rules file. We're kind of giving the AI a little bit of an intro here. We're giving it context of our tech stack that we use. We're giving it kind of a feel for how we actually like to structure our code, right? So this is going to come in handy because it's basically going to tell O1 Pro, hey, here's kind of how I like my code structured. And it turns out O1 Pro is actually going to write code in the manner in which you've kind of defined here, right? You can kind of make this pretty broad in general. You don't have to get super specific here, but it is helpful to define some project structure there. And then you can see we're like getting into some general rules, right? We're talking about, hey, here are general rules. Here are how I want my environment variables managed. Here's how, this is TypeScript based. So, here's how I want types done. You can see we're even doing things like giving it code examples to see how we actually want code written. And it turns out that when you give the AI code examples, right, this is kind of a play on a few shot prompting here. It's actually going to kind of adhere to the style in which you want the code written, right? You can see we're doing front end code. So here's how we want components done. Here's how we want things organized. Here's how we want data fetched. There's client components and server components. We're giving it code examples of both, right? I won't go through this entire thing because otherwise I'm just going to be reading this file to you, which is probably really boring. But you can see, right, we're adding some rules for payments, right? For storage, when we get to Supabase and storage, this is all the rules that we use for storage. And what happens is when the model is, let's go back to our spec prompt here. When the model is kind of generating the technical specification, if you feed it that rules, it's going to have a much better feel on the actual tech spec that it needs to generate, right? So the way we're going to do that, right, is we're going to feed our request. So as context of what we want, we're going to feed it those rules. So it knows like, okay, here's how I should actually build this thing. Here's kind of the tech stack that the creator wants used, things like that. And then we're also going to feed it via repo prompt the entire starter template. So this entire repository here, we're going to feed it like, I want to say this is like 40,000 tokens or so of kind of a starter app. And then the spec is going to be able to look at our code and know kind of how to proceed. Right. So that's kind of all of the context that we're going to be inputting to the spec prompt, which is pretty cool. And then you can see we're kind of getting pretty detailed. We're giving it 11 different things that we want it to take care of here. You can see we're even asking it to wrap its thought process in specification planning tags. So this is one of the things that's kind of interesting. When we start working with O1 Pro, this is a reasoning model. So inherently, it's already going to use what's referred to as inference time compute to actually kind of think about the answer. So some people don't recommend doing this. I completely disagree with them. I think that you should do both. I think that it actually results in you getting better answers. And so one of the things you'll see down here is you can see all these prompts are like super deep. You guys can honestly learn so much about prompting by looking at all these prompts. I'm very happy with how these turned out, by the way. So you can see we're like defining the output again, right? We're saying, hey, here's all the different things we want. All right. And we're being super comprehensive here, right? We're saying, hey, make sure you define how the database should be set up, right? You can look down here, right? This is how we want our authentication set up, right? And again, it's going to pull from those rules. It's going to pull from the starting code. It's going to pull from that request that you just generated with a request prompt. And then you can see at the end here, we're basically telling the AI like, hey, we want the spec to be really detailed, include examples. We want to have it begin with that specification planning. Okay, that was what I was talking about just a second ago with this specification planning tags and kind of forcing it to think about it. We're doing all sorts of these different things, and you're going to see these same techniques used for the upcoming prompts as well. So again, this is one of those things where I could sit here and like ramble about this prompt all day, but it's going to be more helpful if we actually just get to using it. But definitely make sure that you actually take the time to look at each one of these. Otherwise, you'll probably miss some of the details here. So let's keep the train moving here so that we can actually get closer and closer to actually building our app. The last prompt that we need to use before we actually move on to the code generation prompt stuff is the planner prompt. So this is kind of the three steps that go into forming how the AI is actually going to figure out all of the steps that it needs to pass into the code gen, right? So it's step 1 request, step 2 spec, and step 3 prompt. And you kind of feed each one of those 3 results into the code gen prompt. Okay, so let's talk about this last one, the planner. So what the planner is going to do here is, you can see at the very start here, we're doing role-based prompting. So we're saying you're an AI task planner responsible for breaking down a complex web application development project into manageable steps. So again, pause this video really quick and read through the rest of this prompt. Now you can see we're doing things that are very similar to what we were doing in the spec prompt, right? We're passing results from our previous results back from the AI. Okay, so O1 Pro is going to give us these results. We're going to pass them into our new prompts, and we're going to continue iterating, right? So you can see our project request from the first request prompt, that's getting passed in. The project rules, okay, so we're doing that same thing that we just did with the spec prompt, right? Project rules. We're also going to be passing in the starter template, just like we did with the spec prompt. The one new thing that we're going to be adding to this is the technical specification. Okay, so that is going to be the result that you get from your spec prompt. So you're going to basically be feeding all 4 of those things that we were using previously to form the planner prompt. And what the planner agent here is going to do with the AI task planner here is it's going to create a detailed step-by-step plan that will guide the code generation process for a fully functional web app based on the provided tech spec. Okay, so we're really trying to be super specific here with what we want. Once again, you'll see if we scroll down here, you'll see we're continuing to define the output that we want the model to give us back as a result of this prompt. Okay, so you can see in this case, we want an implementation plan. And for the implementation plan, what we want is we want a bunch of series of steps. So hopefully you read through this prompt, you can kind of see where we're going with this. But the idea here is we're going to basically form this step format for all of the different steps that the AI model, in this case O1 Pro, decides we need for the task breakdown. And then what we're going to do with the code gen prompt, okay, so the next prompt that's coming up, is we're going to feed each one of these steps into that code generation process. And that's going to basically be the task that the AI is going to do one step at a time. And we're just going to keep iterating through that over and over with O1 Pro until it kind of builds out our app. So that's basically the gist of the planner prompt. You're basically trying to feed everything that you've done before into this planner prompt. And what it's going to do is it's going to spit out an implementation plan. And then you're going to take all of that data, which includes the request, it includes the spec, and includes the plan, and you're going to eventually feed that into the next prompt, which is the code generation system. Up to this point, everything's pretty much been leading up to our code generation prompt, so let's talk about this guy. But before we talk about it, let's have you pause the video and read through it. So you can see here, again, we're kind of using role-based prompting at the very start here, where we're giving the AI a role. In this case, we're saying you are literally just an AI code generator responsible for building a web app. And then we're giving it its task, which is to systematically implement each step of the plan one at a time. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on this prompt than all the previous ones, just because this is kind of the real important prompt that's actually going to get you the code generation results you want. So quickly at the start here, you can see, once again, we're using all of the results that we've got from previous steps, and we're kind of recycling those to continue to build our context to basically give the AI as much context as possible on what we really want. So you can see project request still getting fed in, project rules still getting fed in, tech spec, okay? This time we're adding that implementation plan that we just got from the planner prompt. And this time, instead of the starter template, okay, so you'll remember previously we were feeding the starter template. Well, what's happening at the code gen step now is at this point, you should be having your existing code base that's now going through this iterative step-by-step process, right? So on the first step, right, it's going to be that starting template, right? Because you haven't had the AI really write any code. But once you get to step 2, what you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that now you're feeding that updated code. Okay, and of course, we're going to show you guys how to do this coming up pretty soon here. So the next thing that we're telling the AI to do, we're saying, hey, you need to identify the next incomplete step from the plan, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to be feeding the AI our implementation plan, right? That's what all of these different implementation steps are going to be. And as we continually iterate through each one of these steps with the CodeGen prompt, what's going to happen is we're going to kind of add an X after the end of every step. And you want to continue to feed the entire plan, even the completed steps, to the AI, right? Because what happens as you start to create new chats is it kind of lets the AI know, oh, okay, here's what I actually did previously. So it gives it kind of a more coherent idea of what it did from start to finish. Whereas if you kind of get rid of those steps and just delete them, as opposed to just adding an X here to mark that they were checked off, you're going to lose some of that really important context. So the reason we ask the AI model to identify the next incomplete step, right, is because if we're doing our job and we're marking which ones get kind of completed, you can see we're saying, hey, marked with this is marked down to do context or format if you're not familiar with that. And so that's just letting the AI know which step it needs to work on. Then we're going to say generate the necessary code for all files in that step. So as you probably read through when you kind of analyzed the planner prompt here, is one of the things that we're asking the AI model to do at the planner stage is identify what files actually need to get edited. And this is just going to give the CodeGen step some context on the actual files it needs to work on. Okay. And then last but not least, of course, return the generated code. So one of the things that we do specify here is we say, hey, the implementation plan is a suggestion. So by saying it's a suggestion, what we're doing is we're preventing the model from getting locked in to basically incorrect thinking. Because like say our planner step missed a file, or say our CodeGen prompt at the time of running where it's actually writing the code realizes, oh, it turns out I actually need another file. Well, by saying the plan was a suggestion, it basically is giving the model permission to kind of act outside the scope of the plan. So it doesn't feel like it has to just do exactly what the plan says. You're basically saying, hey, it's a guide, but if you need to work around it, feel free to. Okay. And then what we're doing here is we're saying for every file you modify or create, you must complete the entire contents of the file. Okay, so this is very important because the way that this workflow is going to work is you're basically literally just going to copy and paste what O1 Pro does for you, and you're going to post that in as a file to your code base. And you're going to do this for each one of the files that it generates or updates in the step. And the reason we need the full file code is then you don't have to like go figure out where everything lives. Every time it edits something, every time it creates something, it's going to give you the full file code so you can just copy and paste in full. Makes for a really slick process. So you can see each file should be wrapped into code block with its file path as header. So this is where we're kind of going to do something that is a little bit unconventional. I think that this works really well, especially if you're a beginner. If you're somebody who's more advanced, you may want to not use the commenting technique that I'm going to be teaching right here. But I think it's actually super helpful because what it does is it allows the model, when you're injecting this current existing code every single step, what it's going to be able to do is going to be able to read a really well documented code base so that it can kind of write better code and have a better comprehensive understanding of the code base. So what is this technique that I'm talking about? So what you'll see here is at the start of every code, you're going to see you're demanding the model does a few things. So basically it has to generate a description of the file, has to identify the key features of the file, has to identify the dependencies of the file, and then it has a little bit of an extra notepad area where it can kind of write more notes. You're also kind of defining some documentation requirements. So this is going to add things like inline comments all across your code. You want it to document types, things like that. You can see even file level documentation explaining purpose and scope, right? That's kind of what this is. And then below those comments, you're saying, hey, all right, write the rest of the code with extensive inline comments and documentation. So when we actually get around to building the app, you'll see what I mean here. And it's kind of up to you whether or not you like this or not. I will suggest that even if you don't like all of the comments it generates and you don't want to keep them in your code base, I do think that it's at least helpful at the generation step because the comments almost act like extra thinking tokens that are going to be able to guide the model to write better code. So that's kind of my rant about that. We'll talk about that more when we get actually around to building the app. So you can see we then are basically giving the model some more guidelines here, right? Only work at one step at a time, include all of the code, make sure it follows our rules, make sure it follows our tech spec, all this kind of stuff. And then we're basically just saying, begin by identifying the next incomplete step for the plan, right? Kind of already mentioned that, but it never helps or never hurts to continue to reiterate to the model what it has to do, and then generate the required code. You can see again, we're reiterating with the complete file contents and documentation. What we're also doing is above each one of these files, and you'll see when we actually begin working with O1 Pro why this is so useful. But what we're doing is we're saying, we also want you to say, here's what you did and why, because one of the things we want to make sure we're doing when we're working with O1 Pro in this workflow is that we actually maintain some level of understanding of what's actually going on in our code, right? Because what can happen, and people have probably heard the term like vibe coding. So what happens when you do vibe coding and you're just like accepting all these AI generations is suddenly your project balloons and you end up at this spot where you don't have any clue what's going on. So when you have the here's what I did and why explanation for each one of these files, you can kind of read through that. And so as you're copying and pasting these things into your code base, you actually are like kind of learning what's going on, which ends up being super helpful. So once it's done for each file, it's then going to end with a step, insert number, complete, here's what I did and why. And then it's going to kind of do the same thing it did for files, but sort of more of a high level summary for the entire request. And you're also going to get some user instructions. So what can happen sometimes is maybe based on something the AI wrote code for, maybe you need to go install a library in your code base, right? And by saying, hey, give us user instructions, we're basically giving the AI permission to let us know what we actually need to do manually that it can't do itself, right? Maybe you have to update a configuration, right? Maybe it's using Supabase storage or something, and you have to actually go in to the Supabase UI and like configure a storage bucket or something. This is where the AI is going to be able to do that. So last but not least, you also are giving the AI permission at the very end here to update the implementation plan if it needs. So if it's kind of working on something and it's like, oh, I think we're going to have to change like step 8 coming up here, then maybe it goes ahead and tells you, hey, update step 8 to include, these 2 extra files or something. This is giving the cogen step permission to alter kind of some of the upcoming plan. So obviously pretty intense prompt here. This is going to be the bulk of what we use in the workflow coming up when we actually get around to building the app here. So that was a little bit of a complex breakdown there. Lots of really good prompting techniques in here. Again, all of these prompts are like super good. And, I spent a lot of time trying to craft these to be as useful as possible. So let's briefly touch on some of the XML version of this prompt before we talk about the review prompt. So we're going to keep this one kind of short. We're just going to talk about the cogen prompt, the XML version of this really quickly. So many of you who are familiar with some of my workflow videos in the past will be familiar with this video I did, which is, this is basically a workflow I did with the O1 Pro using my open source XML parser. So this is going to be a little bit more advanced, which is why I don't really want to linger on it for too long. If you get familiar with the standard cogen prompt and you feel really good about it, and you feel like you're understanding how to build full stack apps, then I recommend maybe to try out the cogen prompt XML version. So what is XML? What's going on here? So basically the way that you have to use this workflow right now, we mentioned this in the previous lesson, but the way that the model is going to work is it's going to output the entire contents of the file. And basically you're going to go for each file at each step and copy and paste that into your code base. What the XML version does is it actually automates this process. So instead of getting kind of a file by file response back from the AI, in the XML version of the cogen prompt, you actually get this giant XML code block, which is a way that if you copy and paste the result from the AI model and you paste it into this open source XML parser that I built, okay, so this is obviously completely free and open source, then what can happen is your changes will get automatically applied to your code base without you needing to do the copy and pasting step. So it makes the iterations happen a lot faster. So you can see inside of the prompt here, what we're doing is we're kind of defining a schema here where we're saying, okay, we need you to define if a file is a create or an update operation or if it's a delete. And what we're basically doing at the parsing step is we're taking this structured output, which is structured as XML, And what we can do is we can kind of parse through each one of these tags, extract the relevant information, and then we can kind of just automatically on our file system with the parser running on our computer, we can actually just basically click an apply button and it will automatically do that for us. So I have entire videos. I'll include the video I have on my X and on my YouTube channel so that you can go watch those. This will cover every single thing that you need to know for the XML style workflow. I highly recommend you actually don't use this version of the workflow unless you really know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to get really confused. Again, I mentioned this in the standard code gen prompt part, but one of the really nice benefits to how we've built this code gen prompt is that the AI explains why it did all of the file changes right above each file. Here's what I did and why. And so when you're actually having to go through and copying and pasting that and reading through all that, then you're just going to get a better feel for how your project works, which is a super, super valuable thing about actually building out these apps, especially if you're building something that's like a real world project, that's like a business or startup, you have paying customers, right? You want to be able to understand your code base. So definitely recommend the traditional code gen prompt. That's what we're going to be using in the rest of this workshop here. But if you're feeling a little crazy, definitely go check out the XML version of this prompt with my workflow videos that I have available on this if you want to get a little crazy. Last but not least is the review prompt. So this one's actually a little bit optional. So the way I like to think about this prompt is it's almost sort of a cleanup step. So you will use the review prompt once you are all done with all of the different steps from the code gen iteration. So basically once the AI is done building the bulk of kind of the initial version of your app, what you can do is you can kind of run the review prompt and see if you can get a little bit of a help with some cleanup recommendations with some things that maybe after all of the different implementation of all of the different steps, the model is basically like, hey, you could probably clean this up. You could probably optimize this. You could maybe move these around. This is kind of duplicating stuff. So that's kind of the goal of what this prompt is for. So you can see, unlike the planner prompt, so let's go look at the planner prompts really quick, right? So with the planner prompt, we were generating these kind of implementation steps, right? So what the review prompt is going to output is something very similar, which is sort of these optimization plan steps. So it looks very similar to the result that you get back from something like the planner prompt. And this makes intuitive sense because what we're actually going to do when you get your response back from the AI model. Okay, so once O1 Pro is done reviewing your stuff, coming up with the plan, what you can do is then you can actually circle back to the code gen prompt one more time. And this time, instead of using the implementation plan, what you'll actually do is you'll add the review plan in instead of the implementation plan. And you'll kind of do the same thing you did with implementation, except you'll be running it on all of these optimization steps. So this is kind of an optional step. I'm not sure how much we'll actually do this in the workflow. I think what we actually might just do is kind of generate the review prompt, and then I can kind of show you what you would do, because this is kind of one of those kind of bonus tasks that you can do to kind of just clean things up, optimize a couple things, but it's not super necessary to kind of getting to the MVP version of your app, right? It's kind of a stretch goal type thing. So we'll end it there. Obviously, again, pause the video and actually read through this prompt. They're all, the great thing about reading through prompts is because they're instruction based, right? Because they're so clear, it's very easy to figure out what's going on in all of them. So let's end the prompting section. Let's kind of wrap this up, and let's actually move on to setting up all the different things you'll need to start building your app. We're now going to start moving on to project setup. Okay, so now we're actually going to finally, after yapping for a long time, we're actually going to get into building things. So you need to go to the GitHub repository for this. We'll have the links for you depending on whatever platform you're on. But once you're on this page, and of course, you guys will see it's locked right now. Obviously, I'll make this public once the video goes live. But this is where we're going to clone the code and get our starting template, right? You'll remember all of those different prompts we just looked at that had the starting template, right? This is where the starting template comes from. So just a reminder, in the future, you may want to use my standard McKay's app template. I'm going to keep this thing up to date over time. I add to this probably once or twice a week. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to keep working within the O1 Pro template system repo here, just because I can kind of freeze this in time so that everybody watching this video is going to be using the same version of this that I am and kind of the current state of this video. So what you want to do here is you want to click this green code button, and you're going to copy this URL. So you can optionally download the code base as a zip folder. I recommend you start getting familiar with Git. It's not as tricky as it looks. And so what we're going to do once we have this copied to our clipboard here is I'm on Mac. So I'm going to swipe over here and I'm just in my Mac terminal. So you're just going to need to open your terminal on whatever operating system you are working on. And you can, of course, you can do this within Cursor too if you want. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go git space clone space paste my URL. And I'm just going to call this, I'm going to call this O1 Pro workflow tutorial. Obviously, you can call this whatever you want. This last argument here is just going to define whatever your folder is called. So I'm just going to hit return. You might want to call it like your app ID or your app name or something. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do CD, which stands for change directory, and I'm going to type this out. So I just do O1, and I'm actually just going to hit tab because I have autocomplete here, but you're just going to want to type whatever folder name that is. You're going to open up that directory in whatever your preferred IDE is. We're going to be using Cursor. I have a shortcut here, so I'm just going to do cursor dot, and that's actually going to open my cursor. Odds are you probably don't have the shortcut on your computer. So all you'll need to do is you'll just need to go open up Cursor or Windsurf or whatever your code editor is. I recommend using Cursor still. I do think Windsurf is really good. So if you're using Windsurf, I'm not gonna get mad at you for that at all. I think as long as you're using one of the two, but just for purposes of this demonstration, we're gonna be using Cursor. Okay, so make sure you go open up that folder in Cursor. I'm just gonna use my shortcut, and you should get to the point where you have the code base from this link downloaded onto your machine. Okay, so this is what we refer to as cloning a repository, and you should have that open up in Cursor. You should be able to see all of that code in the same state that it is currently at on the main branch here on the repository link. So what we're going to be doing over the next few lessons here is if you click into this .env.example file, what you'll notice is we have a bunch of environment variables, and these are this is a really important thing to learn. Okay, and I'm going to start talking about environment variables while addressing security first. So what you're going to really need to make sure that you do is all of the values that you see here, you're going to want to keep secret. You're going to want to keep these private. You need to treat these like they are passwords. Okay, to give you an example of what can happen if you leak these is if you, for example, leak your OpenAI API key, what will happen is anybody with that key, so say you accidentally upload that to your code base or you share that in a screenshot on social media or something, well, what can happen is bad people can take your key and they can basically like drain the credits in your account and use it for their own purposes. So the way that we kind of get around that in code bases is we'll create something called a .gitignore. This is already taken care of for you, so you don't need to worry about this. But one of the things that you'll see here is in our gitignore, you actually have this line here that says .env so this is basically saying anything that is a .env.local file, we're going to ignore that and we're going to not add that to our Git repository. So what you're going to want to do is we're actually going to open our terminal up in Cursor. Okay, you can even open the panel here on the bottom with this button here. And what we're going to do is we're going to click into terminal and we're going to do CP for copy, and we're going to go .env.example. So we're going to copy our example file and we're going to copy that into a .env.local file, and we're going to hit return. And you're going to see over here on the left in our file explorer, this is going to create a .env.local file with all of the same values that were in our example file. So we can now close that example file, and you'll see here in my file explorer how this is kind of grayed out. It's grayed out because that is in our gitignore. And what that means is this file is never going to get pushed to our code base. So this is never going to get uploaded to GitHub, assuming that you're using a gitignore correctly, which we've taken care of for you. This is very standard. This is something that if you're using a starting template, it's almost always going to be guaranteed to be in there. And so what we now need to do in each one of these lessons that are coming up is we actually need to go get the appropriate keys for each one of these services. So before we actually do that, we're going to do a couple more things. What we're actually going to do is we're going to install all of the software libraries that we're using in this package, or in this code base, and in this package.json file here, you can actually scroll through and see all of them here. So what we're going to do in our terminal is we're going to run npm I. Some of you may need to run npm I -- force, so I'm just going to do this with you. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this, and this is going to install all of our dev dependencies and all of our standard dependencies that we're going to be using in our project. You can see once that's done, this message clears up. You kind of reset, so I can actually just type clear and hit return and kind of clean that all up. And now we have everything installed that we need. And what you should be able to do is you should be able to run npm run dev. And if I actually pull in localhost 3000 here, so what you should see is, okay, it looks like I actually have an app running. Ignore what I'm doing right now. Just ignore this. I'm going to run the command one more time here. Let me actually clear this. Okay, so ignore what I just did. npm run dev, and this should actually run it on localhost 3000. Awesome. And what you should hopefully see is this receipt AI app in your localhost 3000 in your web browser. So you're going to run into some problems. You may get an error message, possibly because keys aren't getting injected or something. So like if you click on this dashboard route, this is actually going to build that route. You'll see we're getting a 404 error. This is because this doesn't exist yet in our code base. Okay, so what is going to happen here is this is where the workflow that we're going to be using is going to kind of build our app to get this receipt AI app all built out. So we obviously do need to go through and get these environment variables and sign up for each one of these services. So I'm going to walk you through all of that, but that should pretty much be all you need to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and end this section, and we'll actually start signing up for Supabase. I'm realizing that before we actually talk about Supabase, we should probably get you signed up for GitHub. So let's go ahead and do that. So you're going to want to make an account on github.com. So you can make an account for free. So after you create your GitHub account, you can go to github.com/new, and this is going to take you to the new repository area. So this is where you're going to create your own code repository. This is where your code is going to live for your project. So you can just name this literally anything. So I can name this O1 Pro tutorial video, kind of like I did with the folder. And you'll definitely want to make sure that you check this as private. It defaults to public, so make sure yours is private. You can obviously make that public later, right? If you want to do like something open source or whatever, that's awesome. Highly recommend doing that, especially for creators who are kind of trying to make a splash. There's a lot of awesome utility you can add to the AI community in particular via open source. So if you kind of want to have some fun projects and really get to know some people, definitely recommend doing some open source stuff. But we're going to do a private project, and you're going to want to click create repository. This is going to kick off your repo, and you're going to get a menu that looks like this. For beginners, this looks really confusing. I promise it's not. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do. For experienced devs, obviously you guys know what to do here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to our project here, and I'm actually going to click this little plus button just to create a new terminal here so that I can have my app running on localhost 3000 in one terminal window, and then in the other I can kind of do some Git stuff. So what I'm going to do, because we cloned this repo from my template, is if you do git remote-v, this is going to show you your branch. So you should hopefully see this as origin because you cloned. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do git remote rename origin upstream. And this is going to rename your origin branch as the upstream. Okay, we won't cover Git workflows in this, so because I don't want to confuse you guys. It's just going to make this easier for you guys to set up. So if you hit fun fact, this is actually a great thing. So I'm realizing I already have an upstream here because I'm using a different repository actually than the one I just cloned. So if you actually are in Cursor, here's a quick little Cursor bonus tip, is if you actually get this error message in the console, one of the things I could do is I could add this to chat, and I could say, please get rid of upstream, and watch what happens, right? So this is one of the great things about using Cursor, or if you're using Windsurf, right, is you have these AI tools embedded inside of your code repository, and you can just ask it questions about the code and you can get answers, right? So if you're somebody, especially if you're a beginner, Cursor is such a great tool because not just for code generation reasons, which is somebody like me as a professional dev, right? I'd obviously want to use it for writing code, but just for understanding code in chat and things like that, it can be so helpful. So like, watch this. It basically gave me the command I need. I can just click run. This is going to run at my terminal. And then what I can do here is I can go ahead and run the previous command that I was trying to do, and now it works. So if I hit my up arrow keys back to get remote -v, you'll see we now have an upstream, and it solved the problem. Okay, so quick little cursor tip for you guys. But what we can actually do now, as you'll see down here, that you can actually do get remote add origin. So what we could actually do here is we could paste this in, hit return, and this is going to add this as my origin. And then what you guys are going to want to do is you're actually going to want to copy this. This is going to create a Git branch called main, and then it's going to push it to the main branch of your origin, which is just the link to your code base. And what's going to happen is you'll see this. Okay, all done. Now if we refresh our repository, you can see all the code is here, and you'll see your code here, and this is where your code is going to live. And this is very important because when we get to the code gen step from the prompt system, we're going to be committing each step to kind of save our progress, and you're going to want to be making sure that you use Git for that. So make sure you get to this step, make sure you get your code uploaded to GitHub, and you'll be all set. We're going to go step by step here in our .env.local file. Okay, so if you are not here, make sure you go open up this file. Remember, this is the file that we copied from our example environment variables into this local file so that our app can actually inject these. Another reminder, remember, these are secrets. I'm going to repeat this often as we kind of go through this, just because I really want to make sure no beginners get burned here. Also note, believe me guys, I'm very aware of how environment variables work. I'm going to be showing you my environment variables in here, despite the fact that I'm telling you to treat them as secret, because I do this often. I know how to do these tutorials. I am going to delete all of my keys and reset them before I actually publish this. So there's going to be some experienced dev out there who's like, McKay, like, don't publish your environment. It's totally fine, guys. Like, I delete these before it gets uploaded. We're all good. I appreciate you looking out for me, but trust me, know what I'm doing here. But for your sake, make sure you don't share these with anybody, because that's we're experiencing different things here. So always just default to keeping these secret. Okay, so let's go grab our Supabase variables here. So that's going to be this DB variable and our Supabase variable here. So what we are going to do is we're going to go create a Supabase account. So what you need to do is you need to go to supabase.com. You're going to be able to use their free tier for this project. So Supabase is what we're going to be using for our, not only for our database. Okay, so we're going to be using a Postgres database, which is a form of a SQL database, very popular. Many of you who are familiar with AI coding tools actually are probably already familiar with Supabase, because many popular AI tools like Bolt, for example, uses Supabase and things like that. So very popular tool. We're going to be using Supabase's database, Postgres database. We're also going to be using Supabase as our storage. Okay, so we can do things like uploading the receipts to Supabase storage, and that's going to work really great. Okay, so make sure that you sign up for a free account, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so once you have your account all set up, what you're going to do here is you're going to need to, in one of your organizations, create a new project. So in this case, I'm going to create a new project. I'm just going to call this O1 Pro tutorial. What do I call this? O1 Pro workflow tutorial. I think that's what I've been going with. You should probably be using the micro size here. If you're on a free account, I think you get like 2 of these. It's been a while since I'm a pro user, so mine's going to show additional compute costs because I have a bunch of different projects. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click generate a password, or you can create it. I recommend generating one. It's a little bit more secure. And then you're going to want to copy this value. This is where secrets are going to start. So make sure that for your own sake, you don't expose this, but I'm just going to paste this to my environment variable file for just a second. We're going to need to do something with that in a step coming up here. You're going to want to select a region that's close to you. So I'm just going to default to West US because that's fairly near to me. And then you're going to want to click create project. And what this is going to do, Supabase is then going to spin up a project for you. They're going to get your database all set up. You're going to get everything that you need. You can see there's this little spinner that says setting up project. You're just going to want to chill out for a second, let that run, and It usually takes like 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back here. So as you can see, I now have my project all set up. You can see it is a micro instance. It looks like my project status is still resolving here, but we'll go ahead and move on. This should be done in just a second here. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we grab our environment variables so that we can begin working. So this is where you will need to go for that. So at the very top, you'll see we have this connect button. You're going to want to click that button. This is going to bring up this little bit of a pop-up here. And what we're actually going to want to do is we're using an ORM. We won't go super in depth on ORMs in this video just to kind of reduce complexity here, but you'll see we have an ORM here. What we want to do is click on that and then switch from Prisma to Drizzle. Okay, so we're going to be using Drizzle in this particular template. What you actually want to do is you want to copy this text in between the quotes here. Okay, so you want to copy this and you're going to paste this where it says database URL. You're going to paste that exactly like so. And you should see, I'm just wrapping lines here. You can see this really is just one line. It's just being wrapped for being able to fit in here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cut, this cursor tab keeps trying to predict what I'm doing. You're going to cut that password that you generated at the setup step. You're going to delete your password with those brackets, delete, and then you're going to paste in your password. So you should have a database URL string that looks exactly like this. Remember, don't put those quotes there. Make sure you put your password in, and then you'll be all set up. So now we just need to go grab, we're actually just going to grab these 2 values. We actually don't need to use this yet. There's even a chance, depending on what the AI does, I might even actually end up deleting this by the time you guys see it, but we're definitely going to grab these first 2 values right now. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click the project settings. You're going to go to configuration and you want to click on data API. So once you are in data API, you're going to see project URL. Okay, so you're going to want to copy that and paste that as your project URL here. And then you're going to want to go to project API keys. And you actually want to get this service_role key. Okay, you can see they're emphasizing this is a secret. Again, make sure to keep all these values private. You're going to want to click reveal, copy that value, and this is your role key, and you're going to want to paste it there. Make sure you save the file, and now you should have your database URL, your Supabase URL, and your Supabase service role key. And we should be all good to go and able to set up our database stuff once we actually get working on the app. So now let's go ahead and move on to Clerk for authentication. Up next, we're going to be using Clerk for authentication. So one of the questions I'm going to get probably a lot is why Clerk for auth and not Supabase. We already have a Supabase account. I think Clerk is a little bit more fully featured, right? Clerk is literally just an authentication product, while Supabase is, a bunch of things in one. And so I think Clerk goes a little bit deeper on things. One thing that I will note is that Supabase can actually be a little bit better on the pricing side. If you're doing a viral app with free users, in that case, Clerk's pricing can get a little bit pricey. But if you're doing something like a B2B tool, you're somebody who's like trying to actually make like a B2B product or something like that, Clerk is a little bit more fully featured on that side of things. So regardless of your decision, we're obviously going to be doing Clerk in this video, but either of those is like in practice good. But make sure you sign up for a free Clerk account, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so just like Supabase, Clerk has a very generous free tier, plenty for what we're going to need for this tutorial. So what we're going to do here is you should have your organization. You should get to the create an app screen here, and we're going to go ahead and create a new application. So I'm going to continue to name this O1 Pro workflow tutorial, and you can do all of these different authentication methods. Okay, so they have Clerk has built in all these different methods. I'm just going to keep email and Google to start here. These are obviously the most popular authentication methods out there in the world, right? Most of the apps that you're going to see in the universe are gonna be using these two. So we're just going to go ahead and create our app. This is going to spin up an authentication instance. You don't actually need to worry about this step. We already have this installed for you. This was done when we did the code setup step and we did the npm install. Already took care of this. What you will need to do is you'll need to go to step 2 here, and you will need to set your environment variables. Okay, so you're going to go ahead, click this copy button. We're going to go back over to our code, and these 2 values here, we're going to highlight, and we're just going to paste right over those, and we're going to have our Clerk publishable key and our Clerk secret key. Once again, I'm going to continue to be annoying and reiterate this. Make sure that you keep these values secret. And then these are just basically configuration options that are just going to make your sign up experience a little bit better. So just don't get rid of these because they kind of work with the way our authentication is set up in the template. Okay, so once you have those, you should be all good to go. Our middleware is actually already updated. We already have Clerk Provider in our app. Again, this is, when I was talking about how the template is so convenient, right? If we go into our app code, we go to this layout, you'll see we already have Clerk Provider set up, right? So when you use a template and you're starting new projects, it can just be so helpful to not have to do these things over and over and over, right? And this is why starting templates are so helpful. Like one of the things that I think is actually really high value that you could do is obviously you're more than welcome to use my template, right? It's open source, it's free, it's MIT licensed, which means it's like super highly permissible and you can do anything you want with it. But making your own templates can be helpful, right? Because it may be the case that you don't actually like how something is structured. Maybe you use, maybe to use authentication as an example, right? Maybe you use Supabase auth instead of Clerk auth. So your template would be different than mine, right? So anyways, that's just a little side rant on the power of templates. But what you should be able to do is if we actually, let me pull up my app here really quick. So localhost 3000, reminder, if you do actually need to build your app, you can just run npm run dev. This is going to run your developer environment on localhost 3000 here. And you should get the app. And what you should be able to do now with Clerk is you should be able to sign in now that you put your environment variable keys and you created your Clerk app. This should now let you sign in. So if you actually click on users here in the dashboard, you'll see there aren't any users. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to go ahead and sign in. You can see we're now getting the sign in here for the tutorial. So we could go ahead and create an email or authenticate with Google. I'm going to go ahead and authenticate with Google really quick. All right, so I went through the Google authentication screen. I just need to verify I'm human apparently. This is going to take us back to the app, and you'll see in the top right here, we now have this little user thing. So you can see this is my takeoff email, right? I'm all signed in. We go to the users here. Let me hit refresh. We should see a user, and boom, we now have authentication. How cool is that? So we now have our database set up, our authentication set up. Let's go ahead and get payment set up so that you guys can actually, get paying customers. One thing to note while we're talking about kind of all the setup here in the tech stack is on Takeoff, we do have our Building Full Stack Apps with AI course. So if you're feeling a little lost and you want to go a little bit deeper on some of this stuff, this is like an 8-hour course we have. You obviously don't need to go through this whole thing if you want to kind of go a little bit more deeper in the weeds here. But our section 1, our tech stack section is a 41-minute section. And then our Your First App section kind of walks you through a little bit more in depth on all the stuff we're kind of talking about here, right? So getting set up with front end, GitHub and ENVs, auth backend, all that kind of stuff we do cover here, which many people find it very helpful, especially beginners, to do the cursor course and then learn building full stack apps with AI. We're obviously trying to do kind of a free version of that here to help as many people as possible. But for those of you who are like, wow, I really would like to go a little bit deeper here, that's actually a really killer resource. So next we're going to go jump into Stripe. So this is what we're going to be using for payments. So the great thing about Stripe is you can get signed up really quickly. So go ahead and create an account really quick and come right back. So once you have your account, the great thing about Stripe is you don't need to input like all your business details and stuff like that. So if you're like, well, I don't actually know if I want to charge people or whatever, you can kind of skip this. And at the very least, you can just do test mode, which is just what we're going to be doing here. This is very nice because you don't have to like register a business. Like I was saying, you can just get started with your API and test locally on your developer environment, which is super nice. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new account here and just call this O1 Pro Workflow Tutorial. Great. This is going to launch us into a new account here. We're just going to go straight to the dashboard here. And you can see at the very top, it says you're using test data to accept payments, complete your business profile. So of course, if you want to actually get live paying customers, you're going to have to go to the live mode in Stripe. So that includes, you're going to have to complete your business profile and actually register with Stripe and follow KYC laws and things like that, depending on wherever you live. We don't need to do any of that for this particular workshop. Okay, we're just going to be using test data. So I'm going to walk you through the keys you'll need here. If we go back over to our app, you'll see we need a Stripe secret key. We need a Stripe webhook secret. And then we're going to grab these two payment links that we're going to be using for Stripe checkout links to add subscriptions really easily. Okay, so we're going to have a monthly plan and a yearly plan. All right, pretty simple setup here. But by the end of this, you should be able to hook up everything that we've done here between your database with Supabase, your auth with Clerk, and your payments with Stripe to have kind of a basic little SaaS here, which is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and start working on that. So what you're going to want to do in your search bar up here is you're going to want to go to type dev and you want to go to developers. So this is kind of Stripe's developer area where we're going to go ahead and grab our keys. So if you click on API keys here, you'll see that we have a secret key. So this is a secret test key. Obviously, all of the environment variables are important. Stripe in particular is a very important one to make sure your environment variables stay secret, right? Because you don't want people getting access to your payment information, right? That could be very bad. So just a reminder on that. So let's copy our secret key over. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste that secret key in where it says Stripe secret key. And then for webhook secret, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. So what we're actually going to be using is we're going to be using the Stripe CLI. So CLI stands for Command Line Interface. And what you need to do here is we're going to have, of course, we're going to have the links for you guys. You actually need to get this installed on your machine. So depending on your operating system here, you're going to have a bunch of different options. Stripe has some of the best documentation. They have world-class documentation. So you're going to be able to get set up pretty easy here. You're just going to need to basically follow the instructions here. And I'll kind of cut in between some of these steps here because one of the things that gets a little tricky is you can sometimes expose environment variables and things like that. So what I'm going to want to do here is kind of walk you through that while trying to educate you on being as secure as possible. So get the CLI installed on whatever operating system you're on, and then come right back. Okay, before we start working with the CLI here, it's worth noting you don't necessarily have to develop on the CLI. You could actually just develop directly inside of a deployed developer instance of your app or something like that. We're not going to cover that in this video. That's a little bit beyond the scope of what we want to do on kind of like DevOps side of things, trying to keep this as straightforward and simple as possible on the setup side of things. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our terminal and I'm going to do Stripe login because I already have my Stripe CLI installed. And I'm going to click this and we'll cut to the next step. Okay, so what you should get here is you should get a little bit of a pairing code and a link. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to follow that link. So let me, this actually just opened off screen here. So what I'm going to do is this is actually just walking me through the flow off screen. I'm just logging in via my CLI here or via the link that I got here. And what you should see, and let me drag this in, is you should just see the pairing code here match up to your account in test mode with whatever that code is, and you should allow access. You should get access granted. You can close this window, go back to the CLI, and boom, we have a account ID here for our test account. And what we should be able to do now is we're actually going to run this command. We're going to do Stripe listen --forward -2. Okay, so this is going to forward our Stripe requests to localhost 3000. Okay, so this is going to be the same server where our app is running. I'll explain why in just a sec. /API/Stripe/webhooks. And once you have all that typed out, what you can do is you can click enter, and this should forward all of your Stripe requests to your localhost API. And the reason we're doing it this way is because we mentioned this earlier, but if you go to your API route, we actually have our Stripe API route that's going to handle everything that we need for subscription related events, which is really cool. And so that's just going to forward it to the local instance that we have running on our local machine. We're going to be able to do webhooks that way. So if this is a little bit too complex for you, don't worry, you're not going to be alone here. Getting payments set up with Stripe sometimes can be one of the trickier things to learn. Again, a reminder that anytime you have questions about things, go to the chat in Cursor or in Windsurf or in ChatGPT or wherever you like to ask AI questions, and just ask this thing a million questions, copy and paste your code, and it can answer anything that you need to know about payments. We're also going to be showing you how to get around this. So if you're like stuck at this step and you're like, oh shoot, like I don't know what's going on, don't worry, I'm going to show you a workaround that we can use so that you can continue to test your app without needing to worry about this. But what you'll see here is you should get a webhook secret key. So you see WH, that's just webhook, and then seek for secret. And you're going to want to copy this value, go back to .unity.local, and paste that into your Stripe webhook secret. So now this webhook secret is going to tie to your version that's running here, which is going to be really nice. Okay, so what we can do here is we can actually go ahead and keep this running. Okay, definitely keep this running, because if you close your terminal or something, you're going to have to start it back up again so that these events get forwarded to your local host. And what we should be able to do is we should be able to now go create our payment links and see if this thing's actually working. So one thing that you can do to verify that your webhooks are getting forwarded to your local host is click on webhooks, and you should see this local listeners, and you should see your device with localhost 3000/API/Stripe/webhooks. Okay, so that's exactly what we just did. And you can see status is listening. So this means it's live, it's running. You should be all set. So what you need to do in Stripe is you actually need to click product catalog. This is where we're going to create our first product. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So I'm just going to create a new product here. I'm going to call this Receipt AI. I'm going to call this Receipt AI Pro. What we're going to do is we're going to create two different prices for this. So I'm just going to do $10 monthly. I'm going to add product. We're going to click back into our product. We're actually going to add one more price. So see how we have this pricing section? I'm going to click the plus, and we're going to switch monthly to yearly. We'll just do $100 yearly, and we'll just create price. So now we have two prices. And last but not least, and this is really important, and some of you are inevitably going to miss this, you need to make sure you do this, is in metadata here. What you want to do is you want to click that, and the key is going to be membership. And the value for this is going to be Pro, and you're going to want to save this. So why do we need this? So what's going to happen, and we're going to run the step in a couple of minutes here, is if we go to our database folder here, and we open up our schema, we open up our profile schema. So this profiles table is where we're going to be saving our Stripe customer information and our membership. So what's going to happen is whenever a user signs up and pays, Stripe is going to forward. You can see how we're getting events down here. That's kind of cool. So what's going to happen is Stripe's going to send an event to our API route. Okay, so this route that I showed you earlier, and it's going to create it's going to update an existing profile with their Stripe customer ID, their Stripe subscription ID, and then the membership is going to get added here. So this will change from free to pro if they actually pay, and the way that's being done is through this membership metadata right here. So if you don't do this and a user pays, what's going to happen is this will never get changed, and there'll be a free user, and then you'll have all sorts of support tickets to go sort out, and that will be why. So what we actually need to do next is we actually need to go to payments here, and we actually want to click payment links. So what we're going to do is we're now going to go create our payment links. So we can create test payment link. We're going to add our monthly product here. We're going to create link. We're going to copy this. Okay, so we're going to copy this link. We're going to go back to our environment variables, and we're going to paste this as our monthly link. And we're going to do the same thing one more time. Payment links, new. We're going to do this for our yearly price here. Create link, copy that, paste as yearly, and now we have all of these values. So one thing I'm also just going to show you really quick is if you're kind of stuck on the Stripe CLI stuff, the other thing that you can do is if you can actually get this thing hosted on Vercel, which we'll talk about as we progress through the workshop here. If you actually go back to dev, okay, so we're going to search in the bar to developers, webhooks, what you can actually do is you can add an endpoint, and I'll show you guys how to do this later. But what you'll do is you'll actually add your endpoint URL here. You'll select the events. Okay, we're going to do this for an actual like production version of this in just a second. Oh, not just a second, later on. But this is another way to get one of those webhook secret keys. So hopefully you were able to follow along with this. Again, I very much recognize that this can be one of the trickier things for beginners in particular to follow along with, given the fact that we're kind of running a command line interface. So it may take you a couple iterations to kind of get that running. And if you feel like you just want to skip payments for now, totally fine. We're just trying to add additional value because a lot of you are going to want to, build products that actually have paying users. So we want to kind of get you going in the right direction here. But what you should notice now, so if I actually click back over to my other terminal pane here, what we're going to need to do is we're actually going to need to generate our database migrations, because what is going to happen here is you'll see you're getting this error creating profile, and it's because our tables in our database. So right now we just have this profiles schema here. Again, this isn't something we wrote the code for. This is part of the starter template. What you're going to notice if we go over to Supabase in just a second is that we don't actually have those tables. So let me open up Supabase really quick. I'm going to go grab that. I have that. I have so many monitors, you guys. I have 4 monitors. So let me go pull that off my other screen here and grab that, because what we need to do now is we actually need to generate the tables here. So what you'll notice if we go to the Supabase project for this and we go to table editor, you'll see we don't have any tables. Okay, so what this next step is going to do is going to change that. And so what you need to do is you need to go to a blank terminal here. So I'm just going to click the plus button, open another terminal. And what we're going to do is we're going to run 2 commands. So if we go to package.json, you'll see we have 2 scripts for our database. We have a generate script and a migrate script. So generate is going to generate our database schema. So over here, you'll notice we don't have a migrations folder right now. Watch what happens. What we're going to do is we're going to do npm run, right? And previously we've been running dev because that spins up this next dev command, which spins up our local app on our computer. This time we're going to be running the generate command. So we're going to do db::generate. And what this is going to do is this is going to generate our first migrations file. Okay, so you'll see we got this file here. Yours is going to be randomly named, just like mine is. So if you get a different name, that's totally normal. You'll see we get the SQL code here. And what we can actually do now is we can run this other script, which is npm run db migrate. So now if we do npm run db migrate, this is going to apply this SQL migration file to our Supabase database. Okay, so what we should be able to do is we should be able to jump back into Supabase here, and you will now see that we have a profiles table in our project. And you can see that all of the column types here correspond to what we have generated from this migration file, and this migration file got generated from our profiles schema here that was written in Drizzle, which is just a nice little ORM that we're using to make creating tables and managing them a lot easier in our project. So what we can do next to test that payments worked is we can actually go to our localhost 3000 where our app's running. I'm just going to hit refresh. And just to verify all of the things that you need to make sure are done in order for this to work is your app should be running, okay, on localhost 3000. Your Stripe CLI should be pointing those webhooks to the localhost 3000 /API/Stripe/webhooks. Should be getting these events. And if you are signed in here, what should happen is you should actually get a profile that should create. Okay, so you can see this is my user ID. This is from Clerk. Okay, so now our authentication via Clerk. If I actually go to users here and click on my user profile here, you'll see this user ID, right? This corresponds now to this profile, right? And this is actually just being done as part of our template code here. So you didn't even have to write any code for that, which is super nice. And you can see our membership's free. Stripe customer ID is null. Stripe subscription ID is null. Let's see if we can actually get that changed. This is going to test if our system's working. So if you actually go to pricing here, you'll notice that we have a monthly plan and a yearly plan. These links correspond directly to those 2 payment links we created in Stripe. So if we click on one of these links, what you'll notice is we're now going to a Stripe checkout page. Okay, so this is really good. So what I've done here is I've just filled out this form with some test data. So fun fact, if you're using Stripe for test mode, you can actually just do 4242 over and over and over again. And this is a fake card for fake payments. So if you actually enter that with just a bunch of fake data here and then hit subscribe. So what you should see is you should see a thanks for subscribing. And then if this was done right, what you'll notice here is we got an invoice paid here. So you can see some of these events are firing to our local API that's running. And then if we go to our Supabase table here, you should see the membership get changed to Pro. You should have a Stripe customer ID. you should have a Stripe subscription ID, and boom, we now have a paying user, which is very cool. And obviously this is like fake money. This is on Stripe test mode, so this isn't real. So if we went back to the app, now theoretically this user is a pro user, and so now you could gate certain routes and functionality depending on if they're a free or pro user, right? Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? Now your authentication, your payments, your database, all of that's working. So just as a quick high level overview of what we did, we went into Supabase, we created our Supabase project, we got all of our environment variables pasted into our .env.local file. Okay, we then did the same thing for Clerk, right? We created our Clerk account, got that all set up, got these two environment variables pasted in here. Then we went through that entire process with Stripe, then we hooked it all together with what we just did, and now we have a live table with user data that is coming from Clerk with payments that are coming from Stripe. And all of this is working perfectly all together. And now our app is all pretty much set up. The only thing that we need to do now is if we wanted to actually deploy this to production or to a development instance in the actual cloud, right? To make this instead of a localhost URL, right? Put this on an actual site. We can go sign up for Vercel. And the other thing that we're going to need to do next too is we're going to go sign up for OpenAI. So let's go do the OpenAI step first, and then we'll do Vercel. Getting an OpenAI API key is actually super easy. So all you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go to platform.openai.com/API-keys. Okay, we'll have a link, of course. And once you sign up for the API, what you're going to need to do is in the API interface here. Okay, so in kind of their dashboard interface, you'll see on the left there's the API keys here. Once you've gone through the sign up flow, or if you already have an account, you're just going to see this create new secret key. You're going to create that. You're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this dev, and we're going to create a key. Reminder, keep this secret. Make sure that this is treated like a password. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to go over to our, back to our cursor, back to the .env.local file. We're going to paste this OpenAI API key in, and we're all good to go. That's literally every single thing that you need to do. And now we can move on to Vercel. Last but certainly not least, on the setup side of things, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get our repository here deployed to Vercel. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to sign up at the very least for Vercel's free hobby plan. So this should have every single thing that you need. Again, if you're building a business or something, you may want to upgrade to the pro tier once you're getting ready to deploy to actual users, but the hobby tier is going to be plenty for now. So go ahead and get signed up to that hobby plan and then come right back. All right, so once you've signed up, you should be hopefully in your dashboard. So what I'm going to do here is you'll just see I'm on my takeoff projects team here. This is one of my pro plans I have. But again, if you're on a hobby tier, that's totally fine. And what you're going to want to do is you want to go to add new and you want to click project. So you may have to do some sort of connection step here. What this is going to do for you is going to allow you to select from your Git repositories directly from your Vercel project creation page. So if you have some sort of connect to GitHub area here, go ahead and complete that. And once you are done, you're going to want to connect to whatever repository that you are pushing your code to. So I'm actually going to go to O1 Pro template system here. I'm going to import my repository. I'm going to verify that this is going to the correct team. Project name's right. You'll see framework preset is set to Next.js, which is being inferred from my code, which is great. And what I can do now is you'll see how we have this environment variables tab. I'm going to go ahead and open up this little drop down. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to our .env.local file, and you're just going to copy this entire thing. Okay, so I'm literally just going to copy this entire thing. I'm going to paste it into my environment variables, and you'll see it populates all that, right? Pretty slick. So a couple notes on this. So what we're doing is we're actually going to create a development instance of this. So typically in a production workflow, what you'll have is, as I open this back up, you'll kind of have a development server, and you'll also have a production server. So basically you're going to want to deploy your keys for the particular kind of instance that you need. So for example, if you were deploying to actual users, you obviously wouldn't want to use your Stripe test keys, right? You would actually want to go create that actual business Stripe account that wasn't in test mode, right? You don't want test mode, and you would have to go get your production keys and change those. So anytime, whether you're working on a development instance or a production instance, you're going to want to make sure you have the appropriate keys. Once you have your environment variables here, what you're actually going to want to do really quick is you're going to need to open up the build directory here, and in your install command, we're actually going to change this. So you're going to click this toggle here, and you are going to need to do npm i -- force with this particular template. The reason for that is we're using Next.js 15 with React 19, and there's a couple of little janks in how the dependencies shake up. So you're going to need to override this install command for the time being. And then you're going to want to click deploy, and this is going to kick off a new deployment of your app. So if we go down here, you'll see this is queuing up a deployment. It's building our app here. So this is going to take a minute or two. Then we're going to get a deployment summary here, and then it's going to actually assign us a live domain that we can actually see our hosted app for. So I'm going to let this build, and then I will come back. All right, so as you can see here, I got a successful deployment. Okay, so this is great. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to dashboard, and I'm going to kind of show you a few things to make note of. So you'll see that we have a domain here. Obviously, this is going to be something that we want to test for our development environment. So this is one of those things that you want to be a little bit careful of, because if you leak, your development environment or something, what can actually happen is, say, for example, I'm using my OpenAI API key here. So if we have like an AI chat app or something, we wouldn't want some random person on the internet to be able to find this. So Vercel does have ways to kind of hide this so that your team members have to like actually sign in to their Vercel account and things like that. That's well beyond the scope of this particular tutorial. So we're going to keep things relatively simple here, but that is something that you want to be aware of. But I can click on this URL and I can actually see my deployed app, which is pretty cool. I would be able to sign in. In fact, let's actually go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and sign in right now. Okay, I'm going to continue with Google. I'm going to go ahead through this process. Boom, just like that, you can see I'm now signed in. So all of our stuff is working. You could even test payments if you wanted to. I'm just going to assume that works for right now and just kind of keep things moving along. But one of the things you'll notice is if we actually go to the Vercel dashboard, if you go to settings, you can kind of change your domain, which is pretty cool. Anytime you need to tweak your environment variables, you can go to this environment variables tab. You can go below and actually edit these. It's worth noting that anytime you change an environment variable, in order to get those updated into your actual app, you'll need to trigger a new deployment, because if you just change them here, your built app won't actually have those in there. So what you would need to do is you would need to go to deployments here. You need to click this drop down here, and you need to create a new deployment to get your changed environment variables. That's something I see beginners in particular really struggling with, because they go to settings, they tweak an environment variable, and they don't realize they need to deploy again. So that's something to keep in mind, and we'll probably see that workflow at some point over the course of this video. So that is deploying your app to Vercel. So at this point, you have a working database, you have working authentication, working payments, you've deployed your site to a real URL on the internet. And so now we can finally actually get on to building the app with our O1 Pro template system with the 6 prompts that we were looking at earlier. So let's actually go ahead and finally start building this thing. So I am adding this in. I am realizing that this is a perfect opportunity to actually test payments, because you know what's going to happen here? It's actually going to fail. So it's really good thing that I caught this. Otherwise, many of you would have had a really bad headache over what was going on with your Stripe dashboard. So what happens when you actually want to test your deployed version is you need to go back to your Stripe webhooks, and here's what you need to do. So what we actually need to do now is we need to do first go to the developers page, go to webhooks here, and you actually need to add an endpoint. So previously, when we were working on our local dev environment, right, we're just pointing our webhooks to localhost, right? That's kind of how that works. Well, when things are deployed, right, if the webhook triggers to localhost, it's not going to do you much good, right? Because you're trying to work with a deployed instance. So what you need to do is click add endpoint. And what we're going to do is we're going to go grab that deployed Vercel URL here. And we're going to paste this in, and then we're going to do /API/Stripe/webhooks, just like we were doing with our localhost version. And one of the things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select 3 events. You're going to want to select subscription created. You're going to want to do subscription updated here. And you're going to want to do checkout session completed. Okay, you're going to want those 3 events. And these actually correspond if we open up our code here. Let's go to app/API/route. You'll see we actually have these 3 events being listened to. Oh, we actually need to do subscription.deleted. I lied. Let's change these events really quick and add subscription. We'll uncheck created and we'll do deleted. See, even I make mistakes sometimes. So you should have updated subscription, deleted subscription, and session completed to match the relevant events from our route.ts file here in our API. Once you have that ready to roll, you're going to click add endpoint, and you're going to need to do one more thing. So we're going to go ahead and click webhooks to go back here really quick. So one of the things that you'll need to do now is, instead of just using the webhook secret from localhost, is we actually need to generate a secret key for our new webhook. So what we're going to do, so we're going to click into webhook here, and then you're going to want to click into signing secret. You're going to reveal this, and this is our new webhook secret for this particular route. So remember what I was just talking about with environment variables in Vercel? Here's where this comes into play. So we're going to go back to our Vercel project. We're going to go into settings, and we're going to go into environment variables. Now we want to go find the Stripe webhook secret. We're going to go ahead and click these 3 dots, and we're going to edit this value to now be this new value. We're going to save this. Okay, so we now have our updated environment, and Vercel has this awesome little toast. So we're going to click redeploy. We want to redeploy. We're going to do preview environment is great. We can even do production and just deploy this to our production instance. This is going to initiate that new build, that new deployment that I mentioned. You can even click view deployment to kind of see the process of that. We're actually just going to go to the main page of our project here. You can see this is building here and deployment. So I'm just going to sit tight here for a second while this builds, and then I'll be right back. So you can see this took 1 minute and 15 seconds to deploy. Okay, so we can actually go click on this deployment. You can see this should redeploy our app. So what we can do here is we can go back to Supabase. So I actually already did this, but what you can do is Supabase's table editor is really nice because you can actually edit these values. So previously I was a pro user, right? And so what I did was I just went into this column, changed it to free, and I made this an empty value, and I made this an empty value so that I could go test the payment system on the deployed version here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click into pricing. We're going to do a monthly subscription again. This should open my payment link, right? And what we can do is we can fill this form out with our dummy data. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now that the dummy data is filled out, I'm going to hit subscribe. And theoretically, if we set things up with our webhook correctly, this should work. So let's go ahead and verify that that does in fact work. So if I go back to our Supabase table, hit refresh, boom, you can see Pro with the customer ID with the Stripe subscription ID. So why is this working now? It's working now because we created in our Stripe dashboard, we created this new webhook. Okay, so it's now listening to our deployed API, okay, which instead of being on localhost is just matching up to that Vercel URL that we have deployed. Okay, right, that makes intuitive sense. We made sure to get the new signing secret for this route. Okay, so we had to switch the webhook secret from the previous version to the new version. The way we did that was we went into our project, we went into settings, we went to environment variables, made that tweak, we redeployed our build. And so now all of our webhooks are firing to this deployed instance of our app with the appropriate secret keys. That's all connected to our database already because we already had our database environment variables inside of our Vercel project. And so now our payments are all hooked up. So glad I got that one because some people will run into that issue. So when you're working on localhost, you want to point the webhooks to your localhost API, right? You can see mine's now disconnected, so I'll have to go run that CLI again. So if I go back to the Stripe one, I'm gonna have to go close this out, forward that webhook again, and what we should see is we should see listening again, right? And so when we're testing locally on a local host, right, you want to make sure that this is connected and listening and active. If you're testing, in your actual production instance or your development instance, you're going to want to make sure you have the appropriate webhook endpoint all set up with the right secret keys. So that's how you do that. So at this point, we're all ready to go to actually start building our app. So let's get right to it. So just to confirm, you want to make sure that your app is running on localhost 3000 here. So if I go back to cursor here, you can see, sure enough, our app is running. Okay, again, the way you run this is npm run dev. If you need to boot that up. All right, awesome. That's up. You need to make sure your Stripe is running. So make sure to run that Stripe listen forward to with the localhost arguments here. Okay, we'll make sure to have that in the README for you guys, so you guys know how to do that. And then we're going to create one more open terminal here just so we could work with. I'm even going to make this a tad bit smaller. Going to give us a little bit more room here to actually write our code. So the first thing that we're going to do in our actual workflow here, this is going to be kind of step one, is we need to finally go use that request prompt. So the way that we're going to be doing this, and this is actually typically how I work, right, is I'll kind of have my code editor here. I'll have a browser with my localhost app running with all of my services open. And then I'll have one more tab where I kind of have O1 Pro on the left. And on the right side here, I have repo prompt. So this is the first time that we're going to be seeing these two things. Okay, so on the left side, again, I am just in ChatGPT. I have O1 Pro selected. I'm actually going to select GPT-4o for the request prompt because this is a bit more of an iterative step. Tends to be a little bit better for this particular task. And what we're going to be doing, like I said, is we have repo prompt open on the right. So make sure you get repo prompt open because we're going to start talking about this a little bit more. If you're a Windows or a Linux user, let's try and see if we can find some solutions in the community for you guys. The reason that we're going to be using repo prompt, which you're going to see, is because we have a ton of context from our code base that we kind of need to manage. One of the ways that almost like the job of a software developer is changing is your task is moving from writing code to like being a context manager. And so repo prompt is kind of the perfect tool for that. So you're going to see I have a recent workspace open. I'm going to go ahead and open my workspace. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click this open folder button, and you're just going to want to open the same folder, the same repository that you have open inside of Cursor. So you should be able to just go check your file explorer, get that open, and you'll see here when I open this workspace, we have an entire section here of all my code here. So we have all of the different directories, we have all these different files. You can see we can expand all of them and see all of the different files. So this is why repo prompt is so cool, is because say I wanted to, I just wanted to do something that was using my components. Maybe I go and check every single thing other than components, and you'll see right here, my context is actually going down in terms of token count. So like watch what happens when I uncheck this components box. That was like 50,000 tokens, just because this is like the entire shadcn libraries in here. You can obviously uncheck the entire thing, recheck it, and everything will get selected. So you'll kind of pick up the skills of like how to actually use this pretty effectively, right? We can kind of collapse everything. So one of the settings that I kind of recommend you use here is I like to collapse all of my folders here, and then I'll sort from tokens high to low. Because often one of the things you'll experience when you're kind of managing the context of your code base is, the goal here is to keep the approximate token total around 100,000. That's kind of the sweet spot for getting really good responses. So if you start getting over that, the nice thing if you sort from high tokens to low is you can kind of see where you should start removing things. And obviously you don't want to just remove context just for the sake of removing tokens. Like you need to be smart about it. You have to make sure that you're including the relevant context that the AI is going to need to perform your task. So we'll explore more of that going forward here. You're also going to want to make sure you have code map added here, we're actually going to want to also select files for file tree. So your settings should basically look exactly like this. For file tree, you want to include files, and for code map usage, you want this to be complete. We'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the lessons coming up. So like I said, we need to actually use the request prompt. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go over to, I'm just working in Obsidian. So you can use whatever text editor that you like to manage your prompts. Obviously we have the prompts on Takeoff. I'll make sure to link to each one of those prompts so that you can go grab that prompt. In fact, I'll go do that right now. So the way that you're going to grab the prompts is you need to go to our prompt library here. We're just going to start with these 6 prompts here for the O1 Pro template system, and we'll continue to add more over time. But we need the request prompt. So we're going to go ahead and click this copy button. This is going to copy it to our clipboard. And what we can do is I'm actually going to create, I'm going to do one under this main example here. I just like to work in a text editor for this because we're going to be kind of tweaking some of the parameters as we copy and paste from the different steps like we talked about earlier. So I'm just going to paste my prompt in here, and now we have our prompt we can work with. So the first thing that we need to do is we actually have to type out our idea. So one of the things that I've done just to kind of speed this up is I've come up with some example inputs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to paste in this kind of paragraph. So you're kind of want to just basically give the request prompt like, 3-4 sentences, a typical paragraph of sort of just like what your initial concept is. So in this case, we're obviously going to be building this receipt AI web app. But if you have another idea you kind of want to follow along with, definitely feel free to do that. The point is that in the template variable here, this idea template variable, you just want to put whatever your idea is. So I find a paragraph is generally pretty good. You don't have to get super detailed. The iterations that we're actually going to have right now with the AI model is going to kind of flesh this out. So now that I have my full prompt here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to ChatGPT here, and I'm going to paste this in, and we should be able to talk with the model. Okay, so we're finally actually getting to the actual workflow here. So let's see what GPT-4o says. So you can see how we are requesting the output to look like this. You can see that it's kind of giving us that type of format, right? Which is pretty cool. We're now getting the first draft. So the way that we kind of want to look over this is we actually want to kind of think through all of the different questions that it's asking us, and then we want to kind of respond in the chat here, and then we should get another draft back. Okay, so it says some of the clarifications here. So I'm going to just type a 1, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of like quickly answer each one of these. So we'll just say let's only do images for now. We're actually just going to skip PDFs here. Do I need email parsing, auto fetching receipts from emails? No email parsing. For the OCR capabilities, we're going to be using GPT-4o with OpenAI API for OCR-like capabilities. Okay, so that's kind of this first block that we need to clarify. Data extraction and processing. What key data points do we want? So we want merchant name for sure. We definitely want the date. We definitely want the amount. And let's say, let's actually just do those 3 to start. Let's keep it relatively simple. Do we want AI to auto categorize expenses? We'll actually manually categorize it just to vary the, we will manually create categories, and yeah, we'll categorize them. All right, so let's look at number 3. How should users verify extracted data, inline edits, batch verification? Let's have a verify page where we can go through unverified receipts. I'm not even going to bother to fix my spelling errors. I'm just going to be lazy. Do users need export options? Let's, we do want export CSV. CSV, please. So you can see I'm literally just going through all the different clarifications that the AI model is asking. And we're going to do this a couple times, right? So if you feel like you want to speed this up, definitely feel free, but this is kind of what the actual workflow looks like. Receipt stored per user. Yes on search and filter. Looks like I accidentally put this in the wrong spot. Okay, so number 5 here, integrations. We'll just keep it simple. No integrations for now. User management. Let's assume solo users only, no teams. We'll just keep it relatively simple. We will have auth ready to go from our starter template. All right, number 7 here, platform and accessibility. Let's just say it's a web app, but make it responsive so then people can use it on mobile. Keep the UI clean and modern. And then number 8, last but not least, we have monthly and yearly pricing built in as a basic SaaS. All right, let's send this in. Let's see what we get back. So the reason that we want to use a model like GPT-4o is because if this was O1 Pro, it would go think for 5 minutes, which is just kind of overkill for what we need here. So let's go ahead and see what we need here. So we can kind of read through the draft of the version 2. Target audience looks good. Right, receipt, upload, definitely want that. We don't really need mobile camera support. We're just gonna kind of skip that just to scope things down. I don't want to be here like for a literal 8-hour video. If you guys want to do features like that, obviously feel free. Highly recommend you go crazy, but we want to just keep things relatively straightforward here for the system or for the tutorial here. Okay, organization and search. I'm just kind of reading through this, guys. So again, if you need to speed through this, feel free. So far, everything looks good here. We just don't want the camera. Let's just say everything good besides we don't need camera support. Okay, and this should probably be the last thing that we're going to get that final iteration here. And this is probably enough to start. You can obviously get like way more complex here. One of the nice things about getting a prompt like this back, or a result back from the model, right, is we can copy this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to the example input here, and I'm actually just going to go paste this under it so that we can continually use this. And right, if we wanted to go edit different to-do items here, you know, we could add things manually, right? The thing that you want to do at this stage is you just want to make sure that this output from the request prompt meets your expectations here. So make sure you add whatever you need to add, and then we'll go ahead and move to the next step. I think I might have just said we were going to move on to the planner prompt. Reminder that the flow goes request, spec, plan, cogen, review. Okay, so we're actually on the spec prompt example. So let's go ahead and grab that from takeoff. So you want to make sure you go to the prompt library here, go to spec prompt. We're going to go ahead and copy that prompt. We're going to go back over to our text editor, and we are going to paste this in so that we can work with it. So I'm going to have, I'm actually going to do a draft below this and just keep the first one up here, just in case I want to undo something. But you'll notice that the very first input for our spec prompt, okay, so just like we talked about in kind of the sick prompt sections, is that we actually want to go grab the output that we just got back from the request prompt, right? So here's where sort of this prompt chaining mechanism comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the response that I just got back from GPT-4o, and we're going to want to paste this right inside of the XML section here for project request. Okay, that's what this template variable is for. So we're literally going to paste our entire request prompt into there. So the way that this spec prompt is going to work now is you're going to have your typical kind of start here with the role and the task. Then we're going to pass it context of the request, And now we need to go grab our project rules and we need to go grab the code for our starting template. So the project rules are going to be really easy to grab. We can just scroll back over to cursor here. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab this .cursor rules file. Okay, so I'm going to grab this entire file. We are just going to copy and paste that directly into our rules. So note on these rules, this is how my rules are set based on my template. If you guys write code a different way, you're just going to need to make sure that you update your rules to kind of match how you like to work. We're obviously going to keep things aligned to the template for the workshop here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this back. We're going to go back all the way over here. So you can see I have like 4 windows going at this point, and we're going to insert this batch of rules here inside of the XML tags for our project rules. Okay, so I'm going to go paste this in. So this thing's really starting to grow. So the next thing that we need to do now is we actually want to grab the starting template and feed all of the starting code so that we can give O1 Pro a little bit of an idea of how our code base is structured. So this is where repo prompt is going to come in here. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to feed all of the code here into those XML tags. So what we're actually going to do, and this is a nice trick. So inherently the AI models already have a really good feel for the UI library that we use, which is called shadcn. So if we actually expand our components folder here and then expand our UI folder within that folder, you can see we have all of these components that the model can use that are already pre-installed inside of our code base. The reason that I do that is because then it just removes all of the need for you to go install this manually. And basically it just gives the AI this massive component library to work with out of the box, which tends to be helpful, but it's a lot of tokens. So you can see right now we're at about 61,000 tokens here for all these files. You can see when you include some of the other things like the file system, this gets up to 62,000 tokens. And if we actually uncheck this, we're going to lose like 50,000 tokens or so. Okay, so this is now down to 32,000 tokens. You can see that our file tokens went down and our code map files went up. So what if I actually click this copy button? Let me actually show you the settings for this. So click this settings icon. You want to include save prompts, include files, and include user instructions. And if I actually just copy this and paste it into, you know what actually I'll do here? I'm going to paste this in and we're going to select O1 Pro because that's what we're going to be using from now on. If I paste this in here, this actually didn't expand as big as I thought, but what you can see here is this is a absolutely massive file with, or an absolutely massive input with all of our code in it. So you can see we have things like the file map. We're going to have things like the code map. We're going to have all of our files. So this is literally just our code base as a giant string, which is pretty funny. So what we can actually do to show you an example of how many tokens this is OpenAI has this nice tokenizer tool that's just a nice approximator here. So if I paste this into the tokenizer, you guys can see that this is about 28,000 tokens, which is pretty interesting. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and paste all of that code inside of here. So really this is just our entire starting template just without the UI components. So if we actually paste that in here, now we have every single thing that we need. So just to go back up top to look at the prompt and just remind you here, we had the project request, right? And so there's all those tokens. We had the project rules, which is all of these tokens. And then we have all of the starting template code from those. So what's going to happen now is we're actually going to copy this entire input prompt here. And we are going to paste that into O1 Pro. So I'm going to get rid of that old one. We're going to paste it to O1 Pro, and I am just going to send this off. And what is going to happen is O1 Pro is probably going to think for like 3 to 5 minutes. This is just something we got to scroll all the way back down. You can see it's thinking. If we click into details, for some reason it's decided it's going to be thinking in French for now. Who knows? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to when this response comes back. So just make sure, again, you got to go grab the spec prompt and then you have to paste in your project request from the previous step. You have to paste in between, and you got to make sure you keep these XML tags. It really does help the response. Then you have to paste the cursor rules inside of that. And then you have to use repo prompt to grab the starting template without the UI components to save on a bunch of tokens. And we are going to see if I actually paste that entire result. Okay, so that was about 34,000 tokens that we just gave the model. So I'm going to cut to when this is done and we'll talk about it. All right, so we just got our response back from O1 Pro. You can see for some reason, sometimes O1 Pro will return the time it spent thinking, sometimes it won't. This was about 3 minutes or so. So let's just go full screen and analyze what's going on here. So you'll remember calling back to when we were talking about the specification prompt for the first time, and we mentioned one of the things we have it do is we have it use these specification planning tags to kind of think before it actually goes about this. So you can see between this tag, and if we scroll all the way down, let's see where it stops thinking here. Okay, so it actually thinks for quite a bit to right here. This is kind of where it's basically proposing some of the things it should do here. So that's kind of the advantage of taking some of those thinking tag type techniques. And despite the fact that this is a reasoning model, we're kind of still basically trying to get it to double dip. I found that that actually does in fact result in better responses. So you can kind of see it's going through here. One thing that I'll note is I will share all of these chats so you can actually read through these and see what's going on. I'll make those public. I believe if for some reason I'm not able to, I believe I can just share these and make these public. I'll let you know, but I should be able to have links for all of those different chats so you can read through this. We won't kind of waste a bunch of time reading through this, but you can see the result here is we get this output, right? And why did we get this output? Well, let's go back to our spec prompt. Let's actually look at it and take off without all of the extra variables, right? And it's because we're basically asking for the project name, technical specification in this format. So if we go back to our chat, you'll see we get receipt AI, technical specification, and then it's kind of going piece by piece with every single thing that we want. You can see the formatting is breaking just a little bit in how it's being rendered in ChatGPT, but that's totally fine. So what we can actually do is if I just highlight every single thing here, and we're actually going to go take a look at this in the text editor here, what I've actually done is I created some output example pages. So this is one of the nice things about using Obsidian, which is another nice piece of free software. This is what I use for my own personal note-taking app, is it has markdown rendering built in. So if I actually just paste this in here, you'll see we get a really beautiful rendered output that we requested from the model that we can actually look through. So you'll see here we have kind of a system overview, we have project structure, we have feature specification, right? You can even see it's doing like sub bullet points on its stuff with like user stories and things like that. We're getting things like the database schema. You can see it's even building markdown tables to highlight that schema, right? It's doing server actions, right? And it's learning to do all the stuff how it's talking about and describing here based on those project rules and based on our existing code base, right? That's kind of the advantage of doing it that way. So you can see O1 Pro is able to like generate this extremely complex spec here, and it's outputting this exactly how we asked for, right? And this is why this model is so powerful, because what's going to happen is, you know, if you're trying to use this with another model, right, you might bump into you might not even be able to submit the entire request that we tried to make to this model due to, you know, input context window limits on the inputs, right? And you will not get coherent responses, right? Like let's actually put this through the tokenizer really quick just to see how many tokens this was. Right, so if we go back to opening house tokenizer here, paste this in for just a decent estimate. Right, this is 5,100 tokens-ish of extremely coherent work here. So let's actually run through the tech spec, and I want to kind of balance looking through this and also not, you know, making this super boring. And so you may want to actually speed through this if this is kind of boring to you. But what we're going to do here is we're just going to kind of go through the entire tech spec and see if we need to edit anything, right? So if you're somebody who's doing your own app idea, this is where you actually need to go manually edit the tech spec. You might need to remove things and tweak things based on the precise way you want things implemented. But typically the AI is going to have pretty good starting points. You can see system overview, right? This is basically just kind of a description of our app and the general things that we ask for. You can see key workflows, right? And this is pulling in all those key workflows from the request prompt, right? So when we got that output back from our first prompt, this is how it's able to decide every single thing in the tech spec that it needs to do, right? It's pulling all that context in from that prompt result that we got. Okay, so you can see we have upload, we have verification, organization and search, export, and user management. decent little system architecture here. Okay, all of that looks pretty good. This is just like general file structure here. You can see the formatting is a little broken here, which is totally fine. We're just going to kind of assume that's good. So on to number 3, which is feature specification. Okay, so you can see here, this is generally pretty good. You can see it's kind of come up with some implementation steps, handling edge cases, right, verification system. So this is pretty much going through all of these key workflows here and just kind of flushing them out to be a little bit better. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this and going a little bit quickly here. Again, we'll have the full chat for you if you kind of want to slow down and really read into this. But this generally looks pretty good. Nothing is really jumping out at me as being bad. You can see like it's literally pulling exactly how we even name our variables in our template code base, which is pretty cool. So you can see why that's so important. RBAC is minimal. I'm guessing that's like some sort of compliance thing. I literally have no idea what this means. So I actually might just get rid of that just so I can understand this a bit better. We actually don't need, we'll just say assume light mode only. I actually don't want dark mode for right now. Okay, monetization is correct. You can see it's actually correctly assuming that our membership is pro based on our code. You can see this is the general schema, right? So this looks good, right, for receipts. We want to store the merchant, the date, the amount, just like we asked for. Then we can categorize it and verify ourselves. You can see for server actions, so this is kind of our database queries and how we actually interface with our database. All of this looks pretty good here. Other actions, this is important, right? Because this is where we're going to talk about GPT-4o. This all looks good. Design system, I could go like inspect those colors manually and see. This is basically just pulling from our global CSS. So you'll see it as dark mode here. So I'm actually just going to get rid of the dark mode here just so it doesn't get confused where I said no dark mode up here and yes, dark mode down here. We're just going to keep that consistent, right? That's why we review this. You can see it's actually pulling in components from the shadcn library, right? That's kind of why we include that. So just a ton of really good tricks here to get this thing to output something that's pretty good, right? Because every single thing that we've kind of tweaked in here is very minor. So that is very good. And then the last thing that I'm going to do here is this repository. I am keeping this a little bit simple for us. We're actually not going to do testing or analytics. So I'm actually just going to get rid of 11 and 12 here to kind of scope down just a bit. And now we basically have our full output prompt from the spec prompt or our output result from the spec prompt. Okay, so we basically, let's actually just review what we did one more time. Okay, so we got the spec prompt here. We got the spec prompt and it required us to input 3 things. It required us to input that project request, right? That's what we did in the previous step. Then we had to go grab the project rules. That was that .cursor rules file. And then we had to go grab the starting template, right? And we did that with repo prompt here. If I make this side view again, now that we're done reviewing this, okay. And then we sent this off to O1 Pro. Okay, so we did switch models from GPT-4o to O1 Pro, which is what we're going to be using for the rest of this. It outputted us this detailed specification. And then what we did is we just kind of reviewed it, made sure everything looked like it was good according to our liking, tweaked a couple little minor things, and now it's all ready to roll. So let's go ahead and move to the next prompt, which is going to be the planner prompt. So now that we have our spec prompt output, we can actually move on to the planner prompt. So let's go ahead and grab our planner prompt here. We're going to go back to takeoff, go back to prompts. We want the planner prompt, which we are going to copy. We're going to go back to Obsidian here, and I'm going to paste this in, and we're going to start inserting all of those template variables that we need, okay? So remember when we talked about the planner prompt, okay, we're building on top of the request prompt, we're building on top of the spec prompt. So let's go grab the outputs for both of those, right? Because we're going to need 4 outputs here. We're going to need project request again. We're going to need the project rules again. We're going to need the tech spec that we just got. And then we're going to need to get our starting template one more time here. So let's go grab the request output here. Okay, so this was our original request. We're going to copy that, go back to our planner prompt input, and in between these 2 XML tags for project request, we're going to paste in the project request. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and grab our cursor rules again. So let's go back all the way to cursor here. And once again, we are going to copy these, go all the way back, and we're going to paste these in. Next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need the tech spec. Okay, so we're actually going to go grab the tech spec that we reviewed, made some minor tweaks to. So let's go copy this entire file. Okay, so this is going to be all 10 of those bullet points there, or 10 of those numbered points. We're going to paste that in, and now boom, that is a part of our planner prompt now. And last but not least, we're going to go back to repo prompt. We're going to click the copy button again. We want the entire code base here just without the shadcn components because there's so many tokens. We're going to copy that, go between these XML tags right where our template variable is here, and paste that in. And now we have every single thing that we need to copy. Okay, so let's copy this entire thing. Let me actually just paste this into the tokenizer really quick, just so we can get a feel for how many tokens we're working with here. Okay, so this is almost 38,000 tokens, probably a little bit more because this tokenizer isn't exactly the same one that O1 Pro is using. So this, again, this is why O1 Pro is so powerful, because every single token in here is going to get used extremely well. O1 Pro's context window utilization is very great. So we're going to be able to really feed this in and get a great result. So let's go ahead and create a new chat. I'm going to paste that entire thing in, and I'm going to send that off. Okay, so if we let this start thinking here, what we're going to be able to do is we're just going to sit tight here. If anyone from OpenAI is watching this for some reason, by the way, if we could have it so that this doesn't go back to the top, that would be really great. And you can even click on the details if you want to see kind of a summarized chain of thought type deal. So let this run, and then we'll come back and look at it. All right, so this one took about 4 minutes, and you'll see, if I scroll down, you'll see we have a very detailed implementation plan. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to do something very similar to what we did in the previous video, which is we're going to just kind of look at the analysis here. So once again, we have those brainstorming tags. You can see it's kind of thinking a little bit about what it's doing. Again, I know some people are like, well, it's a reasoning model, you don't really need to tell it to do that. I find that it actually helps. So I'm going to continue to do it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to copy the output. So once again, this output is formatted in the exact way that we requested it in our actual prompt. Okay, so this is why O1 Pro is so great, because it really precisely follows the instructions that you give it. So what we want to do here is we want to go to planner prompt output example here in my Obsidian app. I'm going to paste that in so we can kind of analyze this. So once again, it looks like we got about, 15 steps, I believe is what I saw here. Okay, 15 steps. So what we can do here is we can kind of go through this very similarly to how we did with the spec prompt, and just make sure that all of these steps seem good. And what we can do is we can actually tweak things based on what I outputted here. So it's just a reminder, we obviously talked about this a little bit when we addressed the planner prompt originally, but the way that each one of these steps comes back is it comes back as a named step with a task. We get the list of files that it's generally going to edit. We get step dependencies. So you can see if we scroll down here, like step 10 is dependent on step 3 and 7. That's why we do step dependencies. It just kind of helps the model know what's going on here. You can see everything's formatted as a to-do item. Okay, so we're going to be checking these off as we go through, iterating through each step in the codegen prompt. And then, of course, we have the user instructions. So you can see, for example, in this step, the user instruction is you have to make sure that your .env.local file is named correctly, that kind of thing. So it looks like starting off here, it's going to set up our database. Again, if you want to speed this up, totally feel free. But I'm just going to kind of be reading through. So there might be like little silence breaks, and it's just me trying to read as I kind of go over this. Okay, so Supabase storage actions. This looks pretty good. Looks like we're even adding things like a 10 megabyte file limit, which is a pretty good practice there. Love to see that. You can see the user instruction. It's even instructing us to construct the right row level service or kind of row level security rule here. So this is a policy to make sure that users can only see their own stored receipts, right? Well, that's obviously very important. Okay, then you can see it's kind of moving on to the receipt database actions, right? This makes sense, kind of starting with backend, working its way to front end. You can see it's even instructing us to run our migration. Okay, so again, this is really important, especially for beginners, because the way we've constructed the prompt is the AI, right? O1 Pro is allowed to kind of tell us what we need to do. Because what would happen for like somebody who's never built an app before is they might not know that they have to actually run the migrations manually. Right, so kind of a cool thing, and that's kind of the reason for including these user instructions for each step. Okay, so it looks like AI extraction. So let's actually take a look at this. Looks like, okay, use GPT-4o with OpenAI. Return extracted fields. Okay, so that looks good. Creating a single action for upload plus extract. That looks good. Dashboard and receipts layout. Okay, so now we're kind of getting over to front end stuff. You can see it's even setting up protected route groups, which is great to make sure that users have to be authenticated to hit the dashboard. So it's really like thinking through every single thing that we would need. Like this is honestly a pretty impressive plan. And a reminder, the reason we have the prompt the way it's structured is because each one of these steps needs to be manageable enough that O1 Pro can do everything kind of in one step. Because you don't want to combine, right? Like you don't want to combine like 5 of these so that the entire thing is like 3 steps, because otherwise you're going to get worse results. This is kind of, this is maybe like a little bit overkill for steps. You could probably combine these into like 2 steps. Basically each one of these steps could probably even be like 1 step. I don't know if, does that make sense what I'm saying, guys? Like you could probably ask it to run like step 1 and 2 and then step 3 and 4 at the same time. But we're just going to keep things simple. I think that this is probably properly scoped based on the model's capabilities right now. Okay. So let's see, receipts page, relisting, search and filter. All of that looks good. Receipt upload UI. Definitely we're going to need that. The verification page. So you can see it's correctly even building routes for each one of these pages. That looks great. Delete receipt, definitely want to be able to delete stuff too. Export CSV, we did in fact ask for CSV export, so that's great. And then you can see ensuring protected routes. Okay, so it's kind of just making sure that our authentication is done correctly. UI enhancements. So one thing I actually am going to edit here is we don't want the theme switcher, right? We just want light mode. So I'm actually going to get rid of that one real quick here. We're going to get rid of that dark mode toggle. Okay, again, we don't want dark mode. So it's just a quick little tweak here. Get rid of that dark mode again. Then test and validation. Okay, we're actually going to skip tests so we can get rid of this step. There's one step that we don't have to do. And then last but not least, this is actually not really a code generation step at all. It's basically just asking us to make sure things are deployed. So I'm actually just going to get rid of that because it doesn't actually need to do anything there. And this looks like a plan. So it looks like our final plan here is going to be a 13-step plan. You can see each one of these plans is very detailed, right? We have the files that the AI is going to need to work on. We have kind of the general task, step dependencies, and we even have those user instructions. So what we're going to proceed to do now is we're going to take this plan, we're going to take our technical specification, we're going to take our request output, we're going to feed that into the CodeGen prompt, and we're going to iterate through each one of these steps. Well, let's go ahead and start building this thing. So now we're going to need to go step by step constructing our CodeGen prompt as we go. So let's go grab our CodeGen prompt to start off here. Reminder, we're not going to be doing the XML version of this. If you are interested in doing the CodeGen prompt with XML, definitely check out the lesson that we did previously. At this point, this was probably like 90 minutes ago. So you can check that out. We're going to do the standard one because that's much easier to follow. So let's go ahead and view this prompt. We're going to go copy it into our Obsidian here. And let's look at the input variables that we're going to need for our CodeGen prompt. So this one is going to need 5. Okay, so we're going to need the project request, project rules, the tech spec, the implementation plan, and then reminder, this time instead of the starting template code, you need to actually, every time that you actually run a new step, you're going to have to update the existing code with whatever the latest code is, right? It doesn't make much sense to be on like step 6 and you're giving it the code from step 1, right? So we're going to need to make sure that as we iterate through each one of these steps, that we're updating our existing code. So let's go ahead and fill all these in. This obviously is kind of the boring part. First, we're going to grab our request prompt output. We're going to go back to CodeGen. We're going to input that between these XML tags. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that. Next thing that we're going to need here is going to be the project rules. So we're going to go grab those in Cursor for the final time. Okay, so I'm going to copy those cursor rules. We're going to go back over here and paste those in. So now we need to grab our technical specification output that we got from the spec prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire thing, jump back into our CodeGen prompt and paste that between the technical specification XML tags. Then we're going to go grab the implementation plan that we just got. Okay, so this is going to be all 13 steps of this. We're going to copy this and we're going to paste it in the implementation plan template variable right here. And now this is where we're actually going to be using the existing code tag. So a couple pointers here because this is going to change step by step. So first of all, you're going to need to make sure that as the AI completes each step, you have to go in and actually add an X. So after we finish step 1, right, we're going to add an X here, and that's going to indicate that this is checked off so that the next time we feed the O1 Pro model our prompt here, it's going to realize, okay, we completed that step. Now we're going to run step 2, right? And we want to keep including every single step as context so it has a nice running history of what it's actually worked on. Okay, obviously this is step 1, so we don't need to do that yet, but that's just a pointer here as we actually get working on each one of these steps. Then for existing code, you of course are going to need to update your code with repo prompt and paste in the updated code, which we'll show you how to do for the first time in the next lesson, the step 2 lesson. But for this first one, it's actually just going to be identical to what we've been doing. So we're going to go into repo prompt. We're going to copy this because it's essentially, right, we're starting from scratch. We're starting from that template and we are going to paste this in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire file. Okay, so this is our entire prompt, which once again, let's just go check out what the tokenizer looks like here. Okay, so this is about 40,000 tokens, and we are going to create a new chat with O1 Pro. We're going to paste this in, and we're going to get this thing to start working for us. So what O1 Pro is now doing, and this is why I mentioned way back at the beginning of this workshop, is you kind of want to think like O1 Pro almost as if it's actually an actual developer that you like hired or something. Because what it's doing now is if we jump into our planner prompt here, it's now going and trying to implement the entire code that we need for step 1. So what's going to happen, and we'll talk about this once it finishes working here in a sec, but it's going to give us every single file in full that we need to paste into our code. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to run through each one of those files and any user instructions that it gives us. We're going to make the changes in our code base, right? We're going to do that directly within Cursor here. I can actually now close this cursor rules file because we're not going to need that for a while. And we're just going to keep doing that step by step. So let's go ahead and let O1 Pro work. This is probably going to take probably between 4 and 6 minutes. So I'm going to let this thing run and then we will go over how to do this. All right, so you can see that O1 Pro worked for 3 minutes and 1 second here on step 1. So what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of go file by file here and do every single thing that we need to do. So you'll see for each one of these files, right, we get the file that was edited or added. We got here's what I did and why, right? So this kind of explains what O1 Pro actually did. It gives you the file path so you know where to put the file. And then you can see it gives the entire file with all of the documentation in it. So just a note, if you're someone who doesn't like the documentation, right, we kind of mentioned this earlier, you're more than welcome to change the prompt to remove it. I think that it's at least really helpful while you're iterating through each step here with O1 Pro. And then I think afterwards, if you kind of have the app in a state you want it, and then you kind of want to get rid of all of the extra documentation here, then I think that's probably the time to do that. But I do think that as you kind of iterate through each one of these steps, if you keep the comments for each file, all of these, documentation and stuff like this, I think you're actually going to get much better results. I've tested this pretty extensively and I found this to be the case. So just something to kind of note. All right, so here's what we need to do on our end. So what we're going to do here is we're literally just going to go file by file and click copy, and we're just going to paste the code. So the first file path we need to work on is db/schema/receipts. schema. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go add this to our code base. So I'm going to open up DB, I'm going to open up schema, and it looks like we have to name the file receipts-schema.ts. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's go receipts-schema.ts, and we're just going to paste that in, save it, and boom, you can now see we have a receipts table schema that's extensively documented that is adhering to the code standards that we have indicated in our cursor rules file. Okay, so pretty cool. So that is the first path here. Let's scroll down and go to the next file. Okay, so now we actually need to edit our index file in our schema, right? This is going to export things. So this is actually a file that already exists. So we can just override. Again, this is why we ask OWYN Pro to return the full file contents every time, because instead of us having to figure out, okay, what changed between these two files, we can just do a really easy copy and paste workflow, which is super awesome. Okay, so let's go to number 3. So now we'll update the db/db.ts file. Okay, that could be located right here. And just like we did last time, we're going to paste the new file in, and you're going to see we now have that receipts table in our schema. We got some new comments, some good documentation here. So that's great. All right, let's scroll down. It looks like we now need to tweak the env.example file. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So worth noting that it's going to ask me to update the example file, but we're of course also going to need to update our .env.local file because that's where our actual envs are. Also worth noting that because we tweaked an env, what are we going to need to do? We're going to need to go into Vercel. We're going to need to go into our settings. We're going to need to go to our environment variables here. So it looks like we don't actually have that variable added. So what we can do is we can literally just paste that, hit save, and remember we have to redeploy to make sure that this gets added. So we're going to click redeploy again, and this is going to inject that new environment variable. Okay, so that's very important. And then you can see we got step 1 complete. We're getting a little bit of an overview what the AI did. And then you can see we're getting the user instructions. So you can see check your .env.local, and you can see make sure to add that. And then it says optionally, we're going to want to generate our drizzle migrations to get this uploaded to our database. Because while we updated the code for our schema, you'll see if we actually go and refresh Supabase here, you'll see we don't have that table. So the way that that's actually going to work in our code is we got to go to our terminal, do npm run db generate. This is going to generate the new migration file. So if we go click into migrations, you'll see we now have a SQL migration file for our receipts table. And then of course we need to migrate that. So we're going to do npm run db migrate. It's going to run that migration. And then if we go back to Supabase, we should be able to refresh this and see our receipts table with all those beautiful columns that the AI wrote for us in that schema. Okay, so that is the end of step 1. So one of the things that you'll need to do here is you actually need to get rid of all of your existing code. So normally I'll show you in the next step as we kind of iterate on this, because this can be pretty nasty. Having to kind of go find the opening tag here every single time. So I'm just going to keep scrolling up. Looks like we're still in the code map here. Let's go a little bit further. Here's that file system. Okay, we got to get rid of all that existing code. So we removed our code, and now we need to go up to our step 1 in the implementation plan. We just need to mark that that's complete. So we're just going to add an X in here. And now this thing is all ready to go for step 2. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to jump back into Cursor really quick before we move on to step 2. And we're actually going to commit our code. So one of the things I recommend you do after you are totally complete with each step is you actually want to create a new commit to your GitHub repository. And I'm literally just going to call this step 1. I'm going to commit this. And I'm just using, by the way, my Git tab right within Cursor. You can, of course, use the terminal if you just like to do use Git CLI. And then we're going to sync this up. Okay, very easy for beginners to use. The Git UI there is pretty good. I'm going to do on Mac Shift Command W, and this is going to close on my existing files here. And what you'll notice if we go back to our Git repository, you'll see that on tutorial here, you'll see I have step 1. I just committed this. So what is this yellow pending? So one of the things that's really awesome about connecting your GitHub repository to your Vercel project is every time you commit to your target branch, basically what's going to happen is it's going to build your app, which is pretty cool. So this is actually just going to go through and build step 1. And what that's going to do is that is going to actually deploy your updated code to your existing domain. Okay, so what happens is at the end of each step, you make sure everything is done, you commit your code, and then it will actually build and deploy to your existing URL that you have hosted on Vercel, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get working on the next step here. Okay, so just a reminder, you're going to want to make sure that you check step 1 off, and then we're going to scroll back down to the existing code section. And now we need to use repo prompt to include the existing code. So let's go look at repo prompt for a second, because there's going to be a few things that you need to do here. So one of the things you'll notice is if we actually expand, we're going to go ahead and hit this expand. You'll notice that some of the new files that we created, let's actually close that UI folder so it's not super long, but you'll see that receipt schema in particular, right? This was the new file we added. This actually isn't added to our context. So what you'll have to make sure that you do is whenever you create a new file, and this is really important because what can happen if you don't do this right is you're going to include out-of-date code, and the work that O1 Pro does is actually going to be kind of bad or out of date. So it's very important that you act as sort of a project manager and act as sort of a context manager to make sure that you are always including the correct up-to-date code to O1 Pro. Because one of the things that's going to happen is I can guarantee you over the course of doing like a dozen steps or whatever, you're going to forget to do this once and you're going to get a result that's bad and you're going to be mad at the model when really it's actually your fault for not updating the context. Okay, so we're going to make sure we add this file to context, and you'll see it will bump my token count up. Great. So this is I believe this is the only file that we added, right? Because the other ones were just edits. Okay, so everything is going to be up to date. You can even hit this little refresh just to make sure that everything's up to date. That's usually what I like to do. And you can see everything looks ready to roll, right? If we open up our DB folder, open up our schema folder, right? That's ready to roll. So we're gonna go ahead and copy our new code, our existing code, and you can see my Vercel build is now ready. Okay, so that has successfully deployed, which is great. And now we can go into our existing code tags that we have now cleared from the previous step, paste that in. We're going to go ahead, copy and paste that entire thing. We're going to go back to ChatGPT, start a new chat with O1 Pro, and we're going to pass step 2 in. And what I usually do at this point to make life a little bit easier on myself is I go back to my text editor and I actually just hit the undo button so that we can just easily clear that existing code so that it is now going to be ready for step 3. And what I'll even do is I'll actually just go up here to step 2 and assume that this is going to be done. Obviously, if you go in and do a few edits or you do step 2 over again because maybe you didn't like the result that O1 Pro gave you, then make sure if you don't like the result, then you don't check it off, right? But we'll assume that it's probably going to do a good job for us. And so now this is ready for us at step 3. So we just need to go back to ChatGPT. We need to wait for O1 Pro to finish working, and then we can resume. Okay, so we got the code back from step 2. So let's go ahead and see what O1 Pro did for us. So it looks like we have this first file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the same thing that we've been doing. Okay, we're going to copy this first file. So this is going to be actions/storage/receipts storage actions. Okay, so if we go into our code, we're going to go into actions. Looks like we need a new folder called storage. And then looks like we need to call this receipts storage actions. So we're going to go receipts storage actions.ts. We will paste that file in. It looks like we're getting our first interesting import error. This may be a package that we actually have to install that is going to introduce us to in the user instructions. So let's go ahead and see if there is anything that we need to do. Okay, so it looks like this might be something that we have to debug within Cursor. So that's totally fine. We'll get to that in a second. What we can do here is we can look at the .env.example file. So it looks like we are adding the receipts value here to Supabase bucket receipts, but I believe we already have that. So I actually don't think we need to edit that. So that's great. So let's talk about what happens if you actually get an error back from O1 Pro. So this is why we want to be using cursor, because what we can do is we can actually just hover over this within cursor and click fix in composer. And this is going to activate cursor composer, and it's going to tell us what we need to do. So in this case, it looks like sure enough, we actually did just need to install this package. So let's just click this run button. This is going to run our terminal command. And what's going to happen is it's actually probably just going to need a -- force on this. So what we can do is we can just say, we'll paste that error in and just type fix, and then cursor is going to generate us a new command. Okay, so let's run this other one that should be corrected. And sure enough, you can see that we now have our dependency installed and our error went away. Right, so this is ideally something that maybe we could tweak in the prompt or something, but what happened is just O1 Pro used code for a library that we didn't have installed. So we were literally just able to hover over that error message, click cursor composer, right, paste in the error message we got, and we got every single thing that we needed to actually get this fixed. Okay, so really easy to fix. This is why AI coding tools are so awesome, because even if O1 Pro gets something right, well, then we can just fix it at the cursor level, and still we haven't had to write any code, right? We've just literally just been copying and pasting things and clicking things, and the AI has been doing all of the work for us. So let's go ahead and commit that code. Let me actually just make sure. So that was just the only file, right? Okay, great. So we're just going to commit step 2, commit, sync changes. Once again, this is going to update our GitHub. So if I refresh this, we should see step 2. Great, that is now committed. And then if we go to Vercel, we should see another build starting to run here. And what we can do while that works is we can actually just move right on to step 3. Okay, so this is where we're going to kind of really keep things rolling at this point. So now for step 3, we actually have to jump back into repo prompt, right? We added a new file, so let's go add our storage file. Okay, boom. We're going to go ahead and refresh the context here. We're going to copy our updated code. We're going to go back to our existing code. You remember, we already checked the implementation plan step 2 off, so it knows it's going to be step 3. Paste this in here. We're going to send this off to a new instance of O1 Pro. And we're going to let this work. And reminder, go back to your text editor, hit undo to do that little trick, get rid of that. And then we're going to go up to step 3. We're going to check this off. Now we're going to let O1 Pro work for us. So you can see this was a pretty long think time for O1 Pro, 5 minutes, 17 seconds here. So let's go ahead and get these changes made. Okay, so in receipts actions, looks like we need to go back to our DB here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create, let's see, actions/DB receipts actions. Okay, so we need to do receipts actions.ts. We're going to paste this in here. Looks like we can click on our problems and see what's going on here. So let's go ahead and hover over this and ask Composer to fix it. One thing that's worth noting is you don't want to keep a really long running Composer session. You actually are going to want to reset that in between each step. So let's go ahead and have Cursor Composer fix this for us. Okay, it looks like we got rid of that issue, and then it looks like we have one more issue down here. So let's hover over that. Again, this is a new task, so I'm going to create a new Composer instance here. Okay, it looks like the issue is that Drizzle's delete operation doesn't return rows. Okay, so it's adjusting our query here. We're accepting that, and now we have no issues in our file. Awesome. So O1 Pro plus cursor equals good file. Pretty simple. So let's go ahead and scroll down to whatever's next. Looks like the only thing that we had to do actually was create that file in this step. So looks like user instructions here. Okay, nothing really that we need to do here. So we can pretty much just move on. So what we're going to do is we're going to commit this. So this was step 3. So we're going to commit step 3. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go make sure our actions file that we just added here gets added to our repo prompt context. We're going to refresh that. We're going to copy that context over. Okay, it looks like our build is deploying based on that commit. That's great. And we want to verify, okay, did we finish step 3? Looks like we did, in fact, finish step 3. Okay, so we're going to go to existing code, paste our updated code. We're going to go and copy this entire file. We're going to go start a new chat here. So we're going to start a new chat here. We're going to paste that in and we're going to get this working. At this point, we're going to be moving pretty quickly through these steps. I'll, of course, pause to make sure that the code is correct and all that stuff. But now that we're kind of really in our workflow here and you guys have a good sense of what's going on, we're going to try and keep things moving here. We now have the code for step 4. So let's see what's actually going on here. Okay, so we have extract receipt actions. So let's go ahead and add this file. So this is going to go into actions and not in a subfolder, I believe. Okay. We're going to do extract receipt actions.ts. And you can see what's happening here is that trying to basically teach us how to use OpenAI's API wrong. So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to show you guys a really important skill that you need to know when you're working with O1 Pro, especially as it relates to kind of using APIs and things like that, because you want to make sure you're always giving it the most up-to-date documentation. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring in OpenAI's docs here, and I'm going to show you how you can kind of fix the response that you get back from O1 Pro here. So one of the things that we want to do, right, is we want to use GPT-4's image capabilities with structured outputs. So what we want to do is we actually want to go to OpenAI's docs. And so if we go to, this looks like image capabilities here. So what we can do is we can actually just copy this page. We're going to go back to our O1 Pro chat. We're going to paste all of those docs in. And then we also want to get the docs for structured outputs. We're going to copy this page as well. We're going to go back to our chat and paste this as well. So what we're doing at this point is we're giving O1 Pro the docs for both images and structured outputs for GPT-4o. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to say, hey, actually, here are the docs for using GPT-4o. Image input with structured outputs. Please redo the task with this knowledge now. And what we can do is we can just send this off and this is going to go to work. So if I was observant, I would have probably read through step 4 and known to do this when I sent the initial message. But I was, I'm kind of in the zone here trying to record what's going on here. So you can see here, I kind of caught that issue when I actually was reviewing the code of the actions it did, because this is just not up to date. So this is one of those things, again, like I mentioned earlier, your job is becoming less of a developer and more of a context manager. So in this case, O1 Pro wasn't necessarily writing anything that looks obviously bad, but what would happen is when we connected this with the front end, we'd run into all sorts of errors because it's basically trying to do its call to the OpenAI API in a way that's pretty out of date. So what we did on our end is we basically just gave it that new context by going and finding the documentation on the actual live internet, right? Giving it to O1 Pro as a reply here. So you could kind of do this in two different ways. You can try doing it as a reply, or you could just go copy the original context from your first request and just create a new chat and add this additional context here. So let's go ahead and just see let's see what we get here. So it looks like O1 Pro was able to kind of tweak what we wanted, so we can actually just copy this. You'll see it changed the file name. I'm actually just going to keep the file name what it currently is, and you can see this time it's actually pulling in from the OpenAI docs, and it's more accurately going through the process. You can see it's actually using GPT-4o Mini, so we're going to want to make sure that we switch that. So let's actually go into our file here, and let's override it with the updated version from the docs here. Let's change this to GPT-4o. Looks like we're getting 2 errors here. It looks like we probably just have to install another library. One thing I actually should make sure I do is make a new Composer instance. So let's fix this in Composer here. Okay, so we're just going to need to install these two packages here. Once again, we're going to get the correct version of this. We can run this, and this should get rid of our two errors here. Basically, just needed to install two new libraries here. In fact, this is why you should read the user instructions, right? Because it, in fact, literally told us to do exactly this. So we would have just listened to O1 Pro. It would have fixed it for us. Looks like we have one more thing here. So let's just click on fixed in Composer. We'll do a new Composer session here. It's like probably just a slight typing issue. So we can get that resolved here right within cursor. And just as I suspected it was, sure enough, a type issue. Okay, so we can accept those changes. And we now have step 4 complete. So we're going to commit step 4. We're going to sync that, confirm that it got to our GitHub. Okay, trigger a new build. Awesome. And now what we can do, right, is we can go into repo prompt, make sure we get that new action added, refresh our context, copy that over. And now what we want to do, of course, is we want to go to our existing code area here. So we need to undo that, paste the new code. Actually, before I paste the new code, I'm going to make sure that step 4 gets checked off here. Okay, so we got the action done for extraction with GPT-4o, right, based on how we did the updated documentation. Paste that in, and now our request for step 5 is ready. So we're going to create our new O1 Pro chat, and we're going to send that off with the new updated context and get step 5 working. So one of the things I'll do sometimes while O1 Pro is working, you can see I kind of had 5 minutes and 25 seconds to actually do other tasks, is I'll make sure I actually go in and kind of read through the previous code. And so one of the things I actually noticed was it switched this model. So one of the things I'm going to do as part of this step is I'm actually just going to make sure we switch the model back to GPT-4o, and then everything else is going to be good there. So let's see what we need to do here for step 5. Okay, so we need to do db/receipts actions. It looks like we're doing an update here, and then we're going to update the extract receipt action.ts file. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy the updates to receipt actions. You can see it's basically just renaming some stuff, is creating a new function to create a receipt action. So what we can do is this is actually going to be an edit to an existing actions file. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste the entire file in here. And you can see it's actually trying to import something that doesn't exist yet. That's fine because that has to relate to our second file. So let's go grab our second file here. If we scroll down, you can see these file outputs are super long, which is why O1 Pro is so good, right? It's really the only model right now, at least, mid-February here, that is capable of this. It'll be interesting to revisit this in a few months and see what other models can do it. But yeah, so let's go ahead into extract receipt actions here. Let's paste this in. One of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to switch 4.0 back in here, because what happened was I didn't make that change when I gave it to O1 Pro for step 5. But you can see now that import error is fixed because we have the updated extract receipt action. And of course, you can always read through this, see what it added here. We can, of course, go back down to the very bottom here. You can see step 5 was completed. You can see the user instructions here are all written for us. There's nothing really that we need to do. Get a little bit of a summary. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hit refresh here. And we're going to get the files refreshed. We didn't add any files here, so we don't have to actually go add any files. So we're going to create our new chat here, get that ready, copy our new code base context, go back over to the code gen prompt. We're going to paste in the new code. Actually, before we paste in the new code, let's go mark step 5 as completed here. And so you can see what's coming up now is going to actually be some of that dashboard stuff. Okay, so we're actually going to get into user interface, which is going to be great because this is going to allow us to actually test things. So let's paste our updated code. Let's grab that entire prompt, right? Hopefully you guys at this point are kind of getting used to what this workflow feels like. And then we're going to send that off. And now the model is going to begin working on step 6 for us. While this works, let's make sure that we actually get this committed. Okay, so let's commit. This was step 5, right? Step 5. Losing track of my steps here, guys. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sync that. All right, great. So now that is committed, let's go see if this is finished working. Okay, great. So looks like no timer here. I always like when it gets the timer. I wish it would do the timer every time. It's always interesting to see how long each step takes. Okay, so we're now, like I said, we're going to be getting into UI code. So the first thing that we need to do is we actually need to add the dashboard layout here. So let's go see this. All right, so we need to go to app. We're going to create a new folder route here called dashboard. Again, the way that I am figuring out what I need to add here is just by looking at the file path. So we don't yet have something called dashboard. So we need to create it. And then what we can do is we can add layout.tsx for the dashboard and paste in our dashboard. So you'll see, once again, we're getting an error here. That's just because this is going to be reliant on files that presumably we're going to be adding into a underscore components folder as a subdirectory of this folder. So let's go see what those files are. So let's scroll down to the next one. It looks like we do in fact get that dashboard wrapper component. So let's go ahead and create that. Dashboard-wrapper.tsx, paste in our code, and we should be able to see what the next step is. It looks like that is all we needed to do. Now, one of the things that's really important is we do want to make sure that we're actually actively testing our UI. So what we should be able to do is we should be able to go to our dashboard route. So let's go ahead and click on dashboard, and we should get something rendering in here. Okay, it's possible that we just need to actually rebuild our app really quick. Let me go to the dev server here really quickly. Going to go back to our app. And you know what I'm realizing? I'm realizing that this is actually part of the dashboard route. We actually have to name this dashboard as well. This is kind of a quirk of how Next.js works. So what we're going to do here is, and you know what I'm actually realizing? We're only doing the layout page. This dashboard itself is actually not going to be something that we can see yet until we have the other pages. So I'm actually just kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. You'll see that this is still showing an error. This is actually just an outdated error. So we've actually just refreshed our code editor. You'll see that this in fact goes away. So that is really the end of step 6. Basically, we're going to be doing the pages in just a second here. The layout is actually just a kind of wrapper around all the pages that we don't have yet. So we're going to go ahead and commit step 6. That looks like every single thing that we need here. Worth noting, guys, I'm obviously trying to go pretty quickly here just because the nature of the tutorial, but as you're actually building out your app yourself, you want to make sure like you actually go through each one of these files and figure out what's going on, right? So like, let's just do that just for sake of example here. So what we did here, or rather what O1 Pro did, is it created a protected route. So you'll see this is a protected route, is a dashboard layout. And technically, I suppose this isn't a route yet because we don't have a page, but it's just kind of constructing what our dashboard is going to look like. And you can kind of see here, it's actually creating a little bit of a sidebar here. This will show up in probably step 7 once we have an actual page, but it's basically just creating a dashboard with a sidebar and then a content area. So this actually should look pretty nice once we get to step 7. So what I'm going to do is I committed this, right? Yep, I did commit this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new chat. We of course need to now go and add those dashboard routes. Okay, so we want to make sure we add these files, hit refresh, and now we can go through our normal process of going back to our prompt. Okay, we're going to mark step 6 is completed. Okay, so we're almost like halfway. I think we had 13 steps. So this next one's going to be the halfway point. And where's my code XML tags? Okay, so now let's paste that code that we just copied from repo prompt. Okay, did I copy everything? Yes, I did. Now we want to go back to a new chat and let's kick step 7. Okay, so we're really cruising here. Again, just kind of as a little halfway point here. I'll send this off. Might as well get this thing working, right? Make sure you're reviewing your code. Again, I'm speeding through this because I just, the idea here isn't so much the app that we're building here. The idea is the workflow. The idea is the skills that you're learning here. The idea is to give you ideas of how you can adjust this workflow to meet your own needs. There's a lot of different tips and tricks here going on. So the idea is to inspire you to kind of build your own workflow, and using this one as a starting point. So make sure that you understand what's going on in your app. If you need to tweak your implementation plan, as you're going. Maybe there's a few different things you want the AI to do, right? You can always do that. We're going to be talking at the end of this how you can kind of continue to iterate on the app too. So you don't need to think that these are like the final 13 steps and you can never work on this again. This is just kind of the starting point, and you can use this workflow at any point for, you know, additional features, for things like bug fixes, for things like UI updates. There's just endless possibilities for what you can do with this workflow. So let's let step 7 run and come back. So step 7 is where we're actually going to begin getting pages for our dashboard. So you can see here the very first page that O1 Pro generated for us is this page.tsx for the receipts page. Okay, so we need to go to dashboard, and now this is going to be our first actual page. So we're going to have receipts, and then this is going to be page.tsx. We can now paste this in. And of course, we are going to need to create an underscore components folder inside of that so that we can add these components that O1 Pro has created for us. So let's scroll down to those. Okay, so this is going to be receipts list.tsx. So this is going to be the component that should, based on its name, render us receipts in a list. Okay, so that file looks good. And then we just need to go grab this last one, which is going to be our search form. So we're going to go to the same components folder. This is going to be called search form.tsx. We can paste in our search form component. And now we should have everything that we need. So we're just going to reload our window really quick just to get rid of those 2 type errors. And it looks like in receipts list, we just have one issue that we need to feed to Composer. Okay, so it looks like the property actually does not exist there. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and use cursor agent to fix this for us. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and tweak that. It's going to format that correctly. We can accept that generation from cursor agent, and everything should be good to go. So what we should be able to do at this point is now we do in fact actually have a page. So let's go ahead and take a look at our page. So it looks like, what's going on here? So I literally just made the same error that I just made in the previous one, which is dashboard isn't a route. Dashboard is just a route group. So if we go to /receipts, we should be able to see a page. It looks like we got one little error here. So all we need to do is we need to just copy, paste that error directly into cursor. We'll start a new Composer instance with cursor agent. We will submit that, and it should be able to figure out what's going on here. So when you start getting errors like this, and especially when you notice the same error happening over and over again, that is a really good opportunity to actually go improve your prompt. So that might be a case where we want to go in the prompt and change something. That even could be a use case where we want to go update something inside of our cursor rules. So, you know, you'll remember as part of the CodeGen prompt, right, we're feeding those cursor rules in. So it may just be the case that we need to remind, you know, so in this case, it looks like we just need to use server here for this action. It may just be the case that we need to go update that rule. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try and figure that out. It looks like we're having an import error now. So we're just going to go through the process of debugging here. Okay, so new Composer instance, paste that one in. And it looks like we just need a missing dependency here. So we're going to run our command. I need to remember. See, this is another error that we've been getting over and over again. So we should probably just update our cursor rules. And then what you would want to do is you'd want to go update your cursor rules in your repository here, and then make sure that you go update that in your code generation prompt as well. So that's what you would want to do in that case. Okay, you can see we got a little bit of a flash there. Looks like we have one more error. So this is literally just kind of the process of debugging. This is very normal. You're going to experience this, and it's important for you to be able to see it so that you know what to do in the event that you actually get an error. So one of the things I'm going to actually do really quick is I'm going to stop this. I'm going to show you a quick little cursor trick. So if we actually create a new Composer instance, so I'm going to do Command N on Mac. What you can actually do is / and then reference open editors, and this will actually inject all of your open files here into context. And then if you paste that, it's going to actually help cursor agent find the error a little bit faster. So presumably we have those select tags inside of this search form. It looks like the error it was throwing was that value can't be empty. So it's gone ahead and adjusted value to be all for this anything. And then it's also making a couple other tweaks. It looks like, okay, so you can see now the initial state here is getting tweaked to account for that. We can accept, and now, boom, we have our dashboard. Okay, awesome. So we now have this little sidebar. So if we click on verify, this is going to show not found, right? Because this isn't actually going to be valid in our app. It looks like the routes for this are even wrong. So what we could do is we could actually tell cursor like, so what you would actually probably want to do is you would want to also tag that dashboard folder. So where's dashboard? Dashboard, and we could say, hey, because dashboard is a route group and not a route, we need to adjust the sidebar links. And what this is going to do, it's going to inject now everything that is in this folder into context, and it's going to find the dashboard wrapper that had that sidebar, and you're going to see it actually edits those links. Okay, so combining this O1 Pro workflow with usage in cursor, super powerful. So we can accept that, verify that this looks correct, and sure enough, we have our UI here. And of course, no receipts are going to get found because we haven't actually added any yet, which is totally fine. That is going to happen in the upcoming steps. So let's go ahead and commit our code. Step 7. This is great. So now we're going to have to do quite a bit of updates here, right? Because let's actually expand this and go see what we need to add. So we need to add all of the stuff from receipts page, and I think that's it. We will of course need to hit the refresh button here, and now you can see our tokens are starting to build up. So just as a reminder, you generally want to keep this around 100,000 tokens maximum. If you start getting above that, you're going to want to start removing things that maybe are unnecessary to your particular step that the AI is working on. So let's go ahead and create a new chat here. Let's copy this code base context. Let's go back over to our good friend, the code generation prompt. Mark step 7 as completed. Paste the new code in between the existing code XML tags. Copy and paste this bad boy. Go back over to O1 Pro and ChatGPT, and let's get this step working. Step 8 is going to go ahead and begin implementing our uploader. Okay, so it looks like our first new file here, and you can see one of the things is the format we get is slightly different every single time, but you can see we're still getting all the general things, right? We're getting here's what I did and why, we're getting the file path, we're getting all the code, which means if we're using this prompt in between all of these different chats and still getting consistent results, it means our prompt is good. Okay, so what we need now is we need this receipt uploader. So let's go ahead into that receipts components, receipt uploader.tsx, paste that in. Okay, that looks like that is ready to roll. We're going to scroll down to whatever the next file is that we need. And then we need a, looks like we're actually doing an API route here. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a change of pace. So we're going to copy this and we're going to do app. And then we need to go to our API this time. And what was the route for that? That's receipts/upload. Okay, so this is going to be receipts/upload. And then we need route.ts inside of this. And then we should be able to paste that route. Looks like we're getting one issue here. So let's go ahead and create a new composer instance. And we will let composer do its thing here and fix this one. Looks like it's an import issue. Okay, you can see this is now popping up as a secondary error, and that's probably because it needs to add in a wait here. Sure enough, that was the issue. You'll notice you can kind of predict what it's going to do when you know what the errors are. I'm very intentionally, by the way, trying to write as little code as possible on my own. I'm trying to show you that even for the beginners watching, like, you don't actually have to write a whole bunch of code yourself to start here. So this hopefully should be less intimidating for you because of that. All right, that's kind of the whole goal. The goal is to show you how to do it in natural language so that we can teach you how to actually write code. It's kind of like a Trojan horse for getting you to actually learn how to code. Okay, so that is the second thing here. And then it looks like we need to add the new receipt uploader to our dashboard. So this is a pretty easy thing that we can do with Cursor. So that's totally fine. So what we can do is we're actually just going to copy and paste this step here. And we are going to create a new composer instance. We're going to use that same reference open editors trick. We are going to paste in that message. We're going to give it to composer, and we're going to have composer complete this step for us. Okay, so we're trying to get the AI to do as much work as possible for us. So if we click into this page, in a second here, you're going to see we're going to be getting the diff once it starts writing the code. And then we can go review it. And what we'll do here, and you'll see the response here back from Owen Pro is actually instructing us to test the upload, which sure enough, we want to make sure we do. Because as you begin hooking up your UI to your backend, you're going to want to make sure all of that stuff works, because you don't want to kind of skip that and get to the end of the project and then realize it's broken. You kind of want to realize where the steps break in the middle of the step itself. So you can see we now have the receipt uploader, so we should be able to accept that and then go back to our app and actually test this thing out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring up, give you 1 second, I'm going to go grab some receipts we can try out. All right, so let's see if this thing works. So I'm going to drag a receipt onto this box here, drop it. It looks like nothing happened. Okay, so let's go back into our code editor here inside of Cursor, and let's let agent know that it ran into that problem. We'll just open all those editors and we'll say, hey, so I dragged a file into the uploader and it didn't work. So it looks like agent has potentially identified what's going on here. So let's go ahead and click into the receipt uploader. It looks like it found file with an issue with the file ref dot current value. So let's go ahead and see if it can actually figure this out. So you can see it's kind of applying the change here. Looks like we're adding a bunch of different code. Then it's going to go ahead and check the API route to make sure that whatever it did inside of this API route is being done correctly. So this is basically how we're uploading this file as a blob. Okay, so you can kind of read through the code and see what it's doing there. It looks like it needs to actually tweak a couple things. So you can see here are the improvements it made. And then we're just going to iteratively continue to test this manually here and see if it is now working. So let's go ahead and refresh this route. I'm going to try this again. So let's drag this file in here. Okay, awesome. It looks like we do in fact have a selected file this time. Let's see if our upload works. Okay, so what we can do is we can look in our console here. It looks like we did in fact get an error here. So what we can do is we can just copy the error that we got. We will once again create a new composer agent instance here. Reference our open editors, paste that, and say, please fix this. And once again, we're just continuing to have the AI do all of the work for us, and we're just kind of acting as context managers, as sort of iterating on the errors that it's giving us. And so you can see it's editing my .env.example files. It looks like the way it's actually using everything here is that we need to go grab 2 more keys from Supabase. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go in and grab those keys really quick from Supabase. So if we go into the Supabase dashboard and go to project settings, I think we should be able to go to data API. We should be able to grab our URL here. Let's accept this. And you can see if we go back to our .env.local file, what should happen here. It looks like it actually started working for us. But one of the things that we want to note is we don't want to reuse this service role key. This one should still stay secret. What we actually want is this second key. We want this anon public key, which is allowed to be public, which is perfectly fine. So if we paste that here and try this again, we should hopefully get this working. So what we're going to do is we're going to go click on our Supabase table editor. We're going to go ahead and try the upload one more time. I'm just going to drag that guy in here. Click upload, and let's see if we get an upload. And it looks like the bucket is not found. So this actually makes a lot of intuitive sense, because what actually means for this is we need to go create the bucket. So let's go ahead and we're going to add this to Composer. And we can say, what do I need to do? What's going to happen here? And you can also, by the way, you can do all of this stuff with O1 Pro as well. It's just the fact is that it's going to kind of tell you to, it's just going to take a lot longer. Okay, so what you can see here is we're getting Composer is telling us what to do here. So we got to go to storage/buckets inside of Supabase. Okay, storage, and then we want to go to buckets, and it looks like we need to create a new bucket is what I'm seeing here. Okay, so we need to create a new bucket called receipts, and then we need to actually run the SQL. So first of all, let's create this new bucket called receipts. We're going to save that. And then we have to go to the SQL editor because it was telling us we need to run some SQL here. So let's copy that. We're going to go ahead and run this. Looks like that script ran successfully. And then it's saying we also need to add next public Supabase receipts bucket. So let's add this to our .env file. So we'll add that to the example, and then we'll also add this to the .env file. And then one of the things we should be able to do at this point is we should be able to test this. And now that we've created the bucket, this should work. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like to actually iterate on this. We're going to upload. We're going to go ahead and see what we get here. So it looks like we actually had something violate row level security. So this has to do with the policy we created. So we may need to iterate on this. So we're going to stay in the same Composer instance because it is related to what we've been doing here. So what it's going to do, it's going to go to the receipts storage actions. It's going to go figure out how we're actually uploading this. It's probably going to ask us to tweak something. Okay, so you can see it looks like it created the wrong policy, which is totally fine. It's going to give us a new command to go run inside of the Supabase SQL editor. So we're going to go do that. It's just going to drop our previous policy and create a new one. It's going to go update those storage actions there. And what we should be able to do is we should be able to just accept this. One more time, we're going to refresh. We're going to paste this in. We're going to upload, and it looks like this is not erroring out this time. It looks like this is actually working. So let's go look in our logs just to verify that we didn't get any issue here. It looks like we are getting an issue in the action, which it looks like our data was successfully extracted, but it looks like we had a data formatting issue here on one of the column types. Okay, so this is kind of a new task now, so we'll create a new Composer instance for this one. And of course, we want to reference our open editors. Please fix. And this should just go update the action to fix the column type here. So we're going to let this run for a sec, make that edit that we need. And once again, we're just doing this entire thing in natural language, right? We're not actually having to do any work ourselves. We're just trying to feed the errors to the AI and see if it can actually fix things. You can see, tried one iteration, didn't work, so it's now trying another one. Okay, so let's go ahead and accept that. And let's go ahead and give our new version a try here. I'm going to drag and drop my receipt. We're going to upload it. We're going to let it run. So in the back end, right, what's happening is it's running that extraction function. And you can see we did actually get an upload success, which means if we go to Supabase, if we go to our table, we should now have a value inside of receipts. Okay, so this now works. This is also now correctly extracting my data from the receipt. And then if we go actually to our storage bucket, we should also see that we have the receipts being stored. So you can see there's the image from my receipt. So that's pretty cool. So one of the things to note with storage security here is we may actually want to increase our security for this and make sure that the row level security policies it generates are correct. All right, this is one of the things that's really important to understand when you're having AI write code for you. And so this is where developer McKay is going to step in for a sec. I've been trying to do the whole vibe code thing and have AI do as much stuff as possible. But when it comes to things like security with environment variables, which we've mentioned very often, and then when it comes to like things like table and storage security, you're going to really want to make sure that you ask O1 Pro to implement best security practices. I'm going to kind of just glaze over that a little bit here, just to keep the ball rolling, but that is something that you're going to want to be aware of. Okay, so at this point, I'm actually just going to like totally manually reset my context here. We're actually going to need to go get rid of that components. We can get rid of a bunch of those tokens. We'll start a new chat here. We also should commit our code now that we've tested that the upload works. So this is going to be step 8. We are going to go ahead and commit that. Another thing that is worth mentioning here is you want to make sure you're always asking O1 Pro or Cursor to keep your environment variables safe and make sure you're following best security practice there. So one of the things that we'll need to do is because we added 3 environment variables in this step, we got to go back to Vercel and we've got to add those new keys in. So we're going to click on environment variables. We're going to paste those in. You can see we're even getting a little bit of a warning here. So our anon key with Supabase is totally fine to be public, so we don't actually need to worry about this. So we can kind of hit save and redeploy and make sure that those environment variables get added in. Okay, so now we have the updated context here. So let's copy that over and let's go back to our good friend, the code generation prompt, and we're going to mark step 8 as complete, which was definitely the most complex step we've had yet. There were a lot of errors to iterate on there. Obviously, this is where you get into manually testing, copying and pasting error messages, working with O1 Pro and with Cursor to get those right. And then we're going to paste the new code here, copy that over, and now we can get step 9 rolling. The great news is moving forward, everything's going to be much easier than step 8. Step 8 is just the hardest due to the nature of getting storage set up. So if you were able to get Supabase storage set up, major props to you. That is not an easy thing to get set up as beginner, but it's of course one of those things that pretty much every beginner wants to learn. How do I do file storage? Well, hopefully you have a little bit of an idea of how to do that. So step 9, 6 minutes, 53 seconds, pretty gigantic step here based on generation time. We'll see how much code it actually wrote, but it looks like we need to now update our dashboard wrapper. So this is going to be a file update. So let's go ahead and copy that and let's go. We'll kind of clean up things here. We don't need to open up dashboard wrapper. Of course, we need to paste the fully updated file here. Great. Then the next file that we're going to be working with here looks like we need to create the verification page. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the verify step. Let's go ahead and copy that. We need to create a new page in the verify route group here. We're going to go page.tsx and post this in. It looks like we're all good, except we need to add a component here, which looks like we're going to get the verification list component. So we'll just create that right now, verification list.tsx, and presumably that should be the next item in our list here, which sure enough it is. So we'll go ahead, copy and paste this guy in here. Looks like we're getting a little bit of a table format, which is pretty nice. Looks like we are having a few problems here. Let me just go ahead and see if there's any additional files we need to work with. Does look like we actually need an API route. So we'll go ahead and hold the problems for just a sec. Looks like at app/API/receipts, we actually need an update. So it looks like this is possibly something we actually don't want because we actually can we can call server actions from client components. We just can't create them inside of it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to tell O1 Pro that and see if it can adjust things really quick. So let me just say, yeah, I'm going to do this in O1 Pro. So I'm just going to say, actually, we can use server actions in client components. We just can't create them inside of the client component. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask it to do it do it one more time knowing this. Okay, so this is a technique that we used earlier, and theoretically we can sit here and have it update what it did based on that new knowledge it now has. All right, so we got our updated version here. This is something that's really normal. Sometimes O1 Pro goes down a wrong path, whether it be you prompted it poorly, which it looks like in this case, I may have prompted it poorly, or it just kind of does the wrong thing. So sometimes you're just gonna have to just adapt and either start a new chat or ask it to update things. And sure enough, it looks like this should hopefully be a solution to the problem. So let's go ahead and copy the code into dashboard. Next, we need to create a new server page at verify, which of course we have already created here. We're just going to be updating it with the new version. And then if we go to this third step here, it looks like we need to add a new function here. So you can see we have the full file for receipts actions. So let's go back to our receipts actions, which is in DB here. We can hopefully paste that. And then we should be able to scroll down and let's see, this is obviously a really big file. We now need to copy the code for the updated version of a verification list. And I believe that's probably every single thing that we're going to need here. Okay. So what we can do at this point is, of course, we can fix our errors here, which is going to be this slice. So what we'll do here is we will use the composer button here. We're going to go ahead and click Fix in Composer, and the cursor agent will go ahead and fix this for us. So you can see it was able to search the code base, figure out what the error was, and it fixed it not just in that place, but also in this other place, which is great. So we can accept that. This is just an outdated linting issue from one of our imports, so we can just reload our editor here. What we should be able to do is, I'm not sure why this is complaining actually. Let's just double check that our import's correct here. Okay, so that's good now. Let's go over to our app, and if we click on this verify page, we should be able to see the, looks like our link was broken. Let's go back to our dashboard really quick. One of the things, right, and this is why you need to make sure you're reviewing your code, because I'm guessing that this got overridden. So we actually just need to fix that link here. Easy fix. Click verify, and we should be able to go to the verify page. Awesome. So sure enough, we can actually add a category. So let's say this is like software. Software on February 13th, $21.49. We should be able to click verify. And it looks like that did not work. So let's go ahead and see. I actually should probably look at our planner here, because, and again, guys, like this is literally like exactly why you need to make sure you're reviewing things. So it looks like sure enough that should work. So let's just refresh this and make sure that this is working. So it looks like, yeah, it's not working. So what we can do is we can go to our console, see if we have any errors. It looks like just the button flat out doesn't work. So what we could do is just say, hey, clicking the verify button doesn't work. And we'll reference all those open editors and see if we can get that issue fixed here. So let's go ahead and see what Composer comes up with. As you can see, it's editing receipts actions. So possibly one of the actions in here was done incorrectly. So we'll go ahead and see what's going on there. It looks like possibly the issue was in verification list. So it's going to go ahead and try and make a tweak on that button. So theoretically, this handle verify function needs to be done differently. So let's go ahead and accept those changes and try it one more time. All right, so theoretically, Composer should have fixed this. So let's go ahead and click verify. All right, it looks like we did in fact get that receipt verified. And then if we go back to our receipts page, we should now see that this switched from no verified to yes verified. And of course, we could go check our Supabase table and verify that is correct, which sure enough it is. So awesome. So now, what was this? Step 9. You can definitely lose track of these steps if you're not careful. So let's go commit the code for this. We'll kind of clean things up here. Let's go ahead and go, what was this? Step 9. Commit this code. And now let's begin step 10 here. So we're gonna create a new chat here. Gonna refresh this. We want to actually, what we need to do here is, what did we add here, guys? Let's expand. So we added what? We added the verify stuff, and then we refreshed some actions, and that should be good. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so we're gonna copy that. We're gonna go to our prompt. We're gonna go ahead and mark step 9 is done. Paste our code in that is fully updated, and we're gonna kick off step 10. We now have the code that we need to add a delete button, so we can actually delete receipts for some reason, right? We made a mistake in the verification process where we uploaded something incorrect. Maybe we uploaded a duplicate, who knows, right? So let's go ahead and handle this. Looks like we got an updated receipts actions. So this file should be pretty familiar to us at this point. Okay, so we're gonna copy and paste that. That will override it with the new code. And then presumably we should have some updates to our UI. Okay, so it looks like receipts list is getting an update, right? That makes sense. This is probably where that delete button is gonna be. We'll go ahead and give that a save. Looks like step 10 is complete. Now we just need to go manually test the delete button. So theoretically we could press, I've been saying theoretically a lot, by the way, we should probably stop that. We do get actually a nice little confirmation dialog, so that's a good job by the AI. And then if we kind of refresh these pages, we can even see if we refresh Supabase, sure enough, that record is gone. So O1 Pro absolutely nailed that step. That was an easy one. Like I said, once you get the hard steps done, all of the little features and things like that become very, very easy. So one of the takeaways from this workflow is you really just kind of want to power through those main core tasks. And then once you start tweaking UI and adding little features on top of things, what happens is, because in repo prompt, we're getting more and more context of our code base. It's kind of like the AI is just able to infer better how we work, how we want our code written, how to add things. And so the more code you have written in your code base, it actually ends up being easier to generate new things, which is a really kind of cool thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit step 10 and move on to step 11. We are obviously going to need to create a new chat here. We're going to need to refresh the code. We didn't add any new files. We just edited 2 existing ones, so a refresh will do for now. We're going to go ahead and copy, go back to our prompt here. And what I'm actually going to do, guys, is because this step 11 is kind of our last feature, I'm actually just going to get rid of step 13 and 12 because these things kind of cover some of the stuff that you would want to use our review prompt for. So this is going to be our last step. We're going to get this export CSV working. And of course I need to paste that code I just copied. So let's get this final kind of feature running, and then we'll get that implemented and then talk about the review prompt. So this looks like it was our longest generation yet. 7 minutes and 17 seconds O1 Pro went to work for us. So let's go ahead and look at what we need to do. This obviously is our export CSV feature. So it looks like we had a receipt action update. So let's go update our good friend receipts actions. We should just be able to paste the entire code. You can see this is now 577 lines of code. So O1 Pro able to output very long files of code very consistently. We'll just keep scrolling here. Okay, so it looks like we have a new API route. This is something we will want an API route for, so this is actually correct, unlike previously when it was incorrectly generating one. So we want app/API, okay, app/API/receipts. And this time, instead of upload, we actually want a new folder called export. This will give us a new route. Of course, we need to create our route.ts file. I'm also realizing this should just be ts. So let's make sure we tweak that. And then what we want to do here is we want to copy our code, paste that into our export route here, and we should be able to get the code that we need for the export feature. So now let's go ahead and see where it actually added the export button. So it looks like inside of the receipts page components folder, we need, what was it called? It's called export button. Export dash button.tsx. Okay, we can paste this in. And last but not least, I'm assuming we're going to be adding this to our receipts page. Yep. So let's copy that and let's add it to the receipts page. And then if we scroll down, this should be every single thing that we need, I believe. Yep, step 11 complete. So of course, let's go test that this actually works. So we should now see an export to CSV button, which we sure enough do, which is pretty sweet. So let's click that. Let's see if this works. Can we open this? And boom, we have our CSV export feature, which is pretty cool. Obviously, we only have 2 rows in here, so it's not that impressive of an export, but it's nice to know that we could do that, right? So we could go into verify. I could go verify these 2 receipts that I just added to test this particular instance. You can see these are verified, which is great. Theoretically, we should be able to search rebrickable here. Search. So it looks like our search is broken, so this is something we'd want to go iterate in Cursor or O1 Pro. We'll talk about in just a sec about the review prompt and kind of next steps and where to go from here. But yeah, this is pretty sweet. This is kind of the full feature set that we requested from our original request prompt. So we're going to kind of stop it here. I obviously could sit here literally you could literally just keep iterating on this over and over and over continuously and building out your product more and more and more, right? The purpose of this tutorial is, of course, to show you how, with writing very minimal code, right? I want you to really take a second and appreciate how little code we actually wrote as we commit our step 11 here, right? We basically tried to hand off as much as we possibly could to O1 Pro. And one of the things that's worth noting too is when you guys are working in the context of this workflow on your own ideas and your own projects, it's going to go faster too, because I'm not trying to talk over the entire thing. So the workflow is much more efficient. It feels very kind of slick. And it feels like very futuristic. It feels like what working with an AI in the future kind of should feel like, in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and move on to the review prompt just to kind of talk about that. And then I do want to talk about kind of next steps, because the stuff that we did here really is just the beginning. So let me kind of stop there and I'll address that when we get there. At this point, you now have all of those initial features created, right? This is deployed live to a real URL that actually works, right? Everything is updated. If we were to go to /receipts on this URL, this would take us to the dashboard. Awesome. So everything's deployed, everything's ready to roll. But what happens if you want to continue iterating on this and continue building? So that's what we're gonna talk about for a few minutes. So one of the things that I want to highlight here is if you go over to repo prompt, you'll see we're really only at 54,000 tokens. So we're honestly just barely scratching the surface of what O1 Pro can do. Right, and this makes sense because we really only added kind of a handful of pretty basic features here. So if you wanted to continue doing this, I've mentioned this a couple times, but you're always going to want to make sure your context is around 100,000 or under. So obviously we have a long way to go and we have many, many different features that we could ship with this workflow. So let's say you wanted to work on additional features. Let's say you wanted to make the user experience better. Let's say you wanted to improve the design. How would you actually go about doing all of that with the existing workflow? So one of the things that you would basically want to do is you can almost just kind of loop through the workflow all over again. Okay, so let's actually talk for a sec about what that actually means in practice. So one of the things that you can kind of skip is you can kind of skip the request prompt. You're sort of going to want to feed a similar kind of input into the spec prompt. So that's where we would actually start here. So, let's think of some of the things that we could do, right? We could add bulk uploads for receipts. We could add team features. We could add viewing individual receipts. We could add things like charts and reports, things like that. So what you would want to do is you would want to copy the spec prompt. So let's actually just kind of simulate this. We'll override my example input that I had over here. So what we'll do is we'll paste this in here. And what you would want to do is in your project request, right, within these XML tags, you'd kind of want to describe those additional features that you wanted to build, very similar to what the prompt, the output prompt looked like for the request, or the output looked like from the request prompt. So what you would want to do is like, you'd say like, hey, these are the features I want to work on next. I'm obviously like kind of oversimplifying here, right? But you'd be like, okay, I want to do bulk uploads. I want to do team features. I want to add dashboard with chart analytics, charts plus analytics. I want to add, accidentally undid that. Apparently I can't redo that. You guys get the point. I want to view individual receipts. So what you can do here, right? You could say, clean up the UI to look more production grade, right? You can pretty much put every single thing that you want to work on next inside of here. And then what you would do is, of course, you would paste your cursor rules here. You would go, instead of the starter template, so now you would want to paste the current code, right? So you'd go over to repo prompt, you'd get the fully updated code, and you'd give that to the spec. And then what the spec would do is it would walk you through the technical specification. You would then go do the same thing for the planner prompt, and then you would get the new plan for your new features that you want to work on. And then you'd run through the code gen thing all over again, right? And so you can repeat this for any single task that you want to work on. So if you want to kind of go feature by feature, work on that with the spec prompt, pass that to the planner, work on that feature. Maybe you do the review prompt to clean it all up, and you kind of cycle through that for all of the different major features you want to work on. Like, that's what this workflow looks like beyond what we did here. So again, I could sit here all day for literally like 3 months and just continue to iterate on this product using this workflow. I would just need to manage my context window within repo prompt here, and we could just keep iterating and adding more features, all sorts of things, right? So the important thing is that you understand how this workflow works, because in practice, when you're working on your own projects, you're going to want to do what I'm saying here, right? You're going to want to take the basic MVP that you start off with, and you're going to want to continue to make that into a more and more professional production grade application. So that's kind of what that workflow looks like if you're going to continue down that path, right? You sort of recycle all the prompts all over again, but instead of starting out with that request prompt, you kind of come up with your new feature requests, and you sort of just continually feed the updated code base to all of those different steps. You run step by step through the code gen prompt, and boom, suddenly you're writing apps, you're building apps with O1 Pro doing pretty much all of the heavy lifting, and then you're just having to do kind of minor things within Cursor, and you can do many of those things with natural language. Like, again, I want to highlight how little code we actually wrote to get to what we had. So obviously this is a fairly basic feature set, but it's still pretty cool, right? We have a real UI that's hooked up to a live database, has authentication, has payments. Okay, it's deployed, right? We can view this on a deployed URL. I, of course, now have to go delete all these projects and get rid of my ENVs before I publish this video for you guys. So I got to go and do that. But let's talk about also some additional learning resources for those of you who are kind of starting to get into this for the first time. Maybe you enjoyed this workflow. Maybe you want to learn how to adopt the workflow in other ways. Maybe you thought Cursor was really cool. You want to learn more about Cursor. Let's talk about that for a sec. Hopefully you feel like you learned a lot from this workshop. So to go over some of the things that you hopefully have learned is you've learned how to write pretty robust prompts, and not only write them and analyze them, but kind of actually use them in practice for practical tasks. So hopefully just by kind of reading through these prompts, you guys have seen a bunch of examples of really high quality prompting. We think that prompting is one of the highest leverage skills you can learn. One of the things that I disagree with is some people say as models get better, prompting becomes less powerful. I actually completely disagree with that rather. I think that the more and more powerful models we get, I think the more and more that prompting actually matters, because you can actually just do way more with the models. And so if you're someone who can write great prompts, which really is just communicating effective instructions, right? Acting like a really, really highly effective manager, I think you are going to be well ahead of your peers here. So hopefully you feel like you've picked up some prompting skills. You of course learned how to work with a live database with Supabase. You learned how to build authentication with Clerk. We of course deployed to Vercel, so you should hopefully have a grasp of how to actually deploy your app to the internet so that other users can actually access it. We went through learning how to use tools like repo prompt. so that you can actually manage your context right. We went over how to use O1 Pro. One of the great things about learning how to use O1 Pro is just learning how to use AI models in general, right? So whether you're somebody who likes the Google models, the Claude, the Anthropic models, the OpenAI GPT models, you're going to be able to just be a much better user of all these different models, which is one of the highest leverage skills you can learn in the entire world. So if you're somebody who is interested in kind of learning more and stuff, we do have a bunch of really awesome content on Takeoff. So if you found this helpful, this is what I do full time. We have courses on building full stack apps with AI. So if you want to learn more of kind of that full stack architecture and go a little bit deeper there, we got stuff for you. Okay, we do things like RAG and retrieval, prompt engineering. Our cursor course is just refreshed. So if you're somebody who really loved kind of the features within cursor and you want to get better at that, we have some really awesome curriculum around that stuff. And of course, we do workshops all the time that will teach up-to-date skills. So if you're kind of somebody who wants to learn more, I think even if you don't actually want to join, you can at least just look at like the syllabus for all of this publicly kind of on our landing page. And even this is just like a helpful guide. Obviously, there's a ton of like super great free content on YouTube and things like that that you can definitely check out. Obviously, I do a ton of free guides and tutorials too. So if you did find this helpful, super appreciate if you could like and share this with your friends and subscribe. Really goes a long way in making sure that I can go ahead and continue doing all these free tutorials for you guys. So hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully, more importantly than anything, you feel like you are more enabled and empowered to actually take the ideas that are in your head and actually go build them. So glad we could do this for you guys. It was great to build this along with you.